have 5 committee meetings tonight: the Parks and Recreation Committee, the Police Committee, Finance Committee, Public Works Committee, and the Building and Planning Committee. We will start this evening with the Parks and Recreation Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Whalen.
Thank you very much, President Sinai. We have one agenda item on for this evening, and I will begin by making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adopting a resolution indicating the new grant identification number and reauthorizing the Township Manager to execute all documents and agreements, including reimbursement agreements, between the Township of Lower Merion and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission related to the Parkside-Cynwyd extension of the Cynwyd Heritage Trail. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavin. If anyone has any questions, I'll turn it over to Director Heller.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just real briefly, this is hopefully the third and final resolution we have to do for this project. There was an additional agreement required by the granting agency. So there was some additional funds that they had to grant us, or they were willing to grant us to cover those costs. And this resolution would cover that with the new agreement number. They added a -2 to the same original number. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Director. Does anyone have any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none. Jody, do we have anyone online?
There's no one online.
Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. By all means. I think we're using that one for the public. Thank you.
So I'm here primarily to address the issue of the shortage of fields controversy, but mostly.
Sorry, can you please introduce yourself?
What?
Please start by introducing
John Willis with North Ardmore. But more importantly is, what is the protocol with respect to subcommittee or committee meetings with respect to public comment? Do I have to wait until, can members of the public only address agenda items? Because a certain former commissioner who was served on this board quite augustly for many, many years told me that is not correct, that I could speak on non-agenda items with respect to the subcommittees. So as a resident, and I think other members would like to know, I would like you to get some clarification on that.
Would you like me to answer?
Yes, please.
So the policy of the board is during...
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So the policy of the board is during committee meetings, public comment is only accepted on items that are on the agenda. If you'd like to talk about something that is not on the board's agenda, the opportunity to do that is during the board meeting, which is typically the third Wednesday of every month during public privilege. And at that time, you can talk about anything that is under the board's jurisdiction.
Okay, so if it's a Parks and Recreation issue, for example, if a citizen wants to talk about an issue which is solely related to Parks and Recreation, that citizen must wait until the monthly meeting of the full.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's the only.
And is that codified in the Lower Merion Township Code?
I believe it is.
Okay, because I need to know that, because I have 2 former commissioners who are reasonably right, who have told me that is not the case. And I don't want to run afoul of your procedures.
Give me a call tomorrow and we can talk about it.
I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further comment from the public, I would call this to a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none and no abstentions, the motion passes. And President Sinai, we conclude the Parks and Rec Department.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Whalen. We move directly to the Police Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have 2 items on the Police Committee agenda, an authorization to advertise an ordinance regarding vehicles, and an authorization to conduct competitive examinations. So for both of those, we'll hear from our Superintendent of Police, Michael McGrath. Superintendent?
Certainly. So the first location is Airedale Road between Lancaster Avenue and Old Gulph Road. And we are recommending the establishment of a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. It was determined, after a request was made to look at this road, that Airedale Road is not currently, does not have a posted speed limit in the township code. And under statutory language, it does qualify as a 25-mile-per-hour resident district. And because of that, we are recommending that the board pass the ordinance establishing that speed limit.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Any commissioner comments or questions on this? Commissioner Vice President Gabbard.
Just a quick comment on this. Just want to thank our Traffic Safety Department and Sergeant Colflesh and Officer Farrell. I know this is something that the residents have been, talking about for a while, and I'm glad to see that it's moving forward.
Good, thank you. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Anybody in the room with comments or questions?
Once again, I have a purpose for my statement here. Once again, because I, as a member of the public and other members of the public, might have an issue with respect to a police department issue, we cannot bring it up with respect to a police department, a police committee meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. You would need to do that during public privilege of the floor. Anything that is not on the board's agenda would need to be addressed during public privilege of the floor. That's the only opportunity for the public.
And that is so codified
That is.
in the Lower Merion Township Code?
Yes, it is.
Is that correct, Chairman?
Sir, I'm going to have to add here that,
I'm sorry,
this in itself is not an agenda item that you're speaking to. So, this has been answered by the Township Secretary, and we're going to keep the comments here to things that are on the Township's agenda.
Well, I know, but Ms. Kelly is not a member of the board, and you are, so I'd like to know, you as a chairman, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that is codified?
So I'm going to defer.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so our Township Secretary says it is. We can follow up with this offline, okay, after the meeting. You're not going to get any further answer during this meeting. And this point of the meeting, this stage in the meeting is for comments and questions by the public for items that are on the agenda.
Okay, just so you know, I've researched it significantly.
Okay, so you can bring that up at public privilege.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, Commissioner McComb.
Okay. Anybody else in the room? Jody, anybody online?
There is no one on.
Okay, so I will make the motion that we consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise notice of intent to adopt an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 145 thereof, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, Article 15, Schedules 145 to 101, Schedule 1, Speed Limits by imposing a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit on Airedale Road from Lancaster Avenue to Old Gulph Road, in Section 145-102, Schedule 2, Traffic Control Signals by providing for signals at County Line Road and Montrose Avenue, West Wynnewood Road and Valley 24 Road, and 1860 Montgomery Avenue, Black Rock Middle School. So do I have a second for that? Vice President Gabbard, thank you. I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously. Superintendent, if we could hear from you on the next item.
Yes, currently we have an established civil service list which has 15 applicants on it. They are going through the background investigation process. That is taking place right now. That will get us a few that will be eligible for hiring early in '24. We are asking this evening for authorization to run another test, which will take place in November, so that we can establish the ability to hire additional officers later in 2024. They would likely be attending a class in July of '24. Currently, we're 11 officers down, and that 15 we're currently going through the process. Likely would not fill all those vacant positions.
Thank you. We had discussion last week at the budget workshop, and I could be wrong, but my sense of the board was that we were fully supportive of all the efforts that you are taking to get us back up to authorized strength, and we would encourage all that can be done for recruiting, recognizing that it's a bit of an uphill battle, but you need to stay ahead of it before we get to more of a deficit.
Yes, and this really is the first part of that process to keep the process moving along.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions? Anybody in the room with a comment or question? Jody, anybody online? Okay, so I'll put it in the form of motion. We consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Civil Service Commission to conduct competitive examinations to establish an eligibility list for the position of probationary police officer. Do I have a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavin. I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And that passes unanimously, Madam Secretary. President Stein, that concludes the business of the Police Committee.
And thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. The next item on our agenda is the Finance Committee, and I will turn it over to its chair, Commissioner Zell.
Thank you very much, President Sinai. There's 3 items tonight on the Finance Committee agenda. We'll start with consideration to award a contract for the removal of dead and diseased trees in various locations throughout the township. I'll call on our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Traub, to tell us more.
All right, thank you. So we have 8 bidders for this contract. It was very close among the lowest 3 bidders. If you take a look at the bid tab, the low bidder is a first-time winner, but they're a long-time bidder, so they got their price down enough to win one. Our vendor review showed no red flags. There are 38 trees that will be removed. You'll be seeing later on this year a tree planting, which will be many multiples above the number of trees that are being removed. Overall, the cost is 10% below the budget or staff estimate, and we recommend moving forward.
Thank you, Eric. My understanding from our Director of Parks and Recreation is that while the low bidder has not done tree removal, they've done other work for the township.
That may be the case, yes.
Is Donna still here? And as you said, this low bid is 10% under the cost estimate. Do any committee members have any questions or comments? Seeing none, do any members of the public have any questions or comments? Mr. Willis.
Yes, Commissioner Zella. May I ask the name of the winning bid or prospective winning bid, and what it would be the cost per tree? Is that an appropriate question?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, finally, that's an appropriate question.
Yes. So our practice is to add, if you have any more questions or comments, now would be the time to make them.
Not on this issue.
Great. Thank you. Do any other members of the public have any questions or comments? Seeing none, can you answer that question, Eric?
Yeah, it's in the agenda. It's Joseph McIlvain Tree and Lawn. And if you just take I think it's somewhere around 2,000 a tree, 103,050 divided by 38 trees, a little bit more, 2711.84, $2,711.84 per tree is the average.
It's my understanding that, we have in-house capacity to do tree removal, but we often contract out to add to that capability and tend to do so for the larger trees. So if it's 2,700 a tree, these must be the larger trees that we're seeking to remove that are in the township right of way.
Yeah, and you see that on the bid tab, you do see the diameters on there. Looks like the lowest diameter is around 25 inches, so, and some as large as 49 off the top of my head. So those are some pretty large trees.
The contractor that we have has been the low bidder recently is Jimmy's Tree and Landscape Contractors. They were unsuccessful, but as Eric said, by very little. It was a very close competitive bidding process. Seeing no other questions, I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for dead and diseased tree removal to Joseph McIlvain Tree and Lawn in accordance with bids received on Thursday, September 7th, 2023, with the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer and the approval of the Director of Public Works in the amount of $103,050. Do I have a second? Commissioner McComb seconds. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. The second item for tonight's agenda is also for the committee to consider awarding a contract. This one is for police consulting services, but it's really for a search firm for a new police superintendent. And I'm going to call on our Assistant Township Manager, Brandon Ford, to tell us more.
Absolutely. Good evening, Commissioners. As we know, our Police Superintendent, Mike McGrath, is slated to retire this coming March. So staff has engaged several public sector executive search and recruitment firms to gauge the level of support that they can provide staff in conducting a national level search for Lower Merion's next superintendent. What you have before you tonight is a recommendation from staff after we've conducted several interviews with potential firms with a recommendation to award a contract to Baker Tilly US LLP. Staff consisting of myself and representatives from the Department of Human Resources believe that Baker Tilly provides the best bang for our buck and can provide a level of support and as well as community engagement that the other firms that we've interviewed just could not provide.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our President Sinai to be the first to respond.
Okay, so I'm going to just preview that a little later. I'm going to make a motion to table this for 1 week, simply because we got the actual proposal to review last night, and I think we would all benefit from having a week to review it. Having said that, I think we should continue the presentation and the discussion and any questions.
Absolutely.
But I just want to let people know that later I'll be making a motion.
And by tabling for a week, and if the committee next week were to approve this contract, it would then be voted on by the full board the same evening, so the outcome would be the same as if we voted on it tonight. So, given the late receipt of the very detailed proposal that was submitted. So, do any members of the committee have any questions or comments on this item? We'll start with Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. Thank you, Brennan, for your work on this and for vetting the search firms. My question is about, if you can say a little more about what differentiated Baker Tilly from the other firms, especially around the community engagement piece.
Certainly, and great question. So one of the things that set Baker Tilly apart from the other firms is the level of front-end engagement from the community as well as staff. Baker Tilly proposes and how they would support us is that before even anything is advertised or a candidate profile is developed, they would meet with stakeholders that we would identify as a township. So the board would be able to identify which group Baker Tilly and staff would be able to meet with to gauge their level of satisfaction and to gauge what qualities those individuals and those groups would be interested in a next police superintendent. And Baker Tilly, unlike the other firms, really leaves that open-ended, so that would be up for the township and for the board to decide as to who Baker Tilly would meet with before that candidate profile is offered. Another thing that sets Baker Tilly apart is their option for a community-wide public survey. So taking the idea of the focus groups that I just referenced and developing an online, and I'm sure we can get paper-based copies as well, for individuals, residents who would like to express what qualities they would like in the next superintendent. That we can also take that information in as well. So at the end of the day, before anything is advertised or we actually start beginning the search, we'll have a various database of different qualities and input from various stakeholders, as well as through this general public survey that Baker Tilly would use to develop a draft candidate ideal candidate profile, as well as the advertisement that would eventually be reviewed by the board and then go national through all the different advertising mechanisms that they employ.
Excellent, thank you.
Other commissioners with questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Grimes?
Thank you. Not knowing that we were going to table this, although I certainly don't object to that, I put everything else I had to do aside last night and poured over this, and provided some comments actually to Brandon earlier. And I just want to highlight tonight, and I'll take full advantage of the opportunity to do it again next week. I noticed, and I think you just touched on this, Brandon, that one of the things we're asking Baker Tilly to do is to, or what they say they're going to do in one of their tasks, is to create sort of a profile of what we're looking for in a police superintendent. And while that sounds good, I think that this board is better equipped to decide the qualities that we want in a superintendent. And in fact, we've had this conversation somewhat already with events earlier this year. So my suggestion would be that the police committee or some other committee of this board really have the laboring oar in communicating and deciding what qualities we're looking at, rather than leaving it to a consulting firm to decide that for us. The other thing that I would just put out for food for thought, because frankly I haven't formed a solid opinion on this, is the public engagement component of this. I think it's important to have public engagement. I know that Commissioner Bernheim left us some notes where he questioned whether we should spend, I think, $2,000 for that, and that's maybe an open discussion. But my concern is that that be done carefully, because we are likely to get people who feel very strongly participating in community engagement activities and not sort of the middle. I would note that I believe in our township survey that we did a few months ago, I think like 95% of the township residents were very satisfied with our police services. It was over 90%, as I recall. And it's important because I don't know that if we put out a survey or in community meetings, we're going to get people who are satisfied to participate. So I'm not suggesting we don't do the community engagement. I just think it's important to do it in a very careful manner so we get all opinions. So having said that, thank you for allowing me to comment, and I look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Okay, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Commissioner Zell. I don't think it's something where we're delegating a decision to hire a superintendent to anybody. I think what we're engaging, if we in fact engage Baker Tilly, is that they have experience in the field, their responsiveness, they are tuned to what it is that the municipality is looking for. Commissioner Kramer has very ably and capably chaired our subcommittee, police committee subcommittee on engagement with the Assistant Commissioner Zeloff and others. We have interviewed a number of constituencies. We've extensive interview with Superintendent McGrath, with the FOP, with representatives from faith-based organizations. We're very, very interested in getting a handle on what it is that the community is looking for, any improvements they think we can make in our already excellent police department, and that's something that we'll be looking at going forward. So by no means are we delegating anything to Baker Tilly. They're simply a consultant that will assist in the process, and I think what makes them an attractive candidate is the fact that they have shown some responsiveness and some inclination in that regard. So that's why I think it makes them a good fit, and I think it's something we've all expressed an interest in terms of board priorities. And so we're not deciding tonight, it's been tabled, but I think that's sort of the point of it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you so much. I'd like to echo some of what Commissioner Grimes said with respect to community engagement and the importance of balance there. And I hope that as we move forward, either with Baker Tilly or others, that we're keeping that in mind, that the, I suppose, community habit here is that those with the strongest, most passionate voices are those that are often carried through as the only. And that would be really important to keep an eye on as we move forward. And then the only other thing I was thinking of is in their proposal, Racine and Rockville, Maryland seem to be the two, more or less the two cities along the east or central U.S. that have some comparables to Lower Merion. So I'm hoping that if we move forward, that we can really interview or have some conversations with city officials in those two communities, either before we make the final decision or moving forward to make sure that we can learn from their decision-making as well.
If I can respond to that real
Yes.
quick. I actually did talk to the manager of the city of Rockville, Maryland.
Thank you.
And we had a very pleasant phone conversation, and as you can see from the profile, they are avid clients of
Yes.
Baker Tilly, having engaged Baker Tilly for numerous executive positions, including police superintendent. And they advocated and they endorsed Baker Tilly as a well-rounded consultant that, to address earlier concerns, would act on whatever we would like them to do. So you spoke about the balance.
Yes.
They will do whatever we would like them to do as a township. So the level of engagement is actually dependent on us. So we, if we choose to engage with them, the first meeting would be to discuss that balance and exactly what the level of engagement would look like. And the township has full administrative control over all of it. So, that's one of the things that made Baker Tilly, whereas other firms kind of had a process and they stuck to their process, and it's similar regardless of what community they work for. Baker Tilly really caters their process to the desires of the township.
Okay. Follow-on question, Brandon. I took a quick look at the proposal, and I may have missed this, but did they list any searches in Pennsylvania?
That is the one thing that they are lacking. They haven't really done any searches in Pennsylvania. The closest, as I just mentioned, is Rockville, Maryland. So although they haven't done many in Pennsylvania, that's not to say that they won't in the future.
Do you believe, or Ernie, are there any aspects of Pennsylvania practice or law that impact our selection process?
I do not. I think that policing is pretty much the same, particularly in communities of like size. And frankly, there's almost no one in Pennsylvania like Lower Merion Township. There's not any other comparable communities, really. Certainly Rockville, Maryland is comparable in terms of size and policing, but no, there are differences in state laws from one place to the next, but it's nothing an experienced police professional can't pick up on and deal with very quickly. What we're looking for is the skill to be able to manage a department our size.
Okay. I would just observe with the comments that we've heard so far, you talked about front-end engagement, and I was listening for this group, right? The first group to engage with are the 14 elected commissioners. Because as we have talked, as Commissioner Grimes said, as we have talked publicly, we engage with our police department to a considerable extent, and we have developed an understanding. And so our input, I think, is the first step in engagement. Absolutely. I think that's an important point to make. Do other commissioners have any questions or comments? If not, then I will call on President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoff. I actually have some comments before I make the motion. And they largely are to echo what Commissioner McComb said, which is, I think we've had many discussions on this board about, what is going to be an important search for this township. The police superintendent is an important position for us, and so it is an important search. And, we've had discussions about how do we elicit, the characteristics that we think are important in the superintendent. And I think one of the things that certainly that I had just kind of had in my mind was, okay, we'll elicit it and then we'll get a search firm. And I think as staff went through this, they discovered that possibly the most effective way to elicit the board's view on what those qualities and characteristics of a superintendent that would be important for a superintendent would be not for them to do it before we got a search firm, but to have this firm help us go through that process, right? And so I think of one of the key steps is facilitating that process on the board with eliciting kind of our internal priorities. There are other stakeholders in the township, the police department being one of them, right? That also needs to be elicited, as well as residents, and so I think if we are going to take that process seriously, we are not going to simply keep our own counsel, but we are going to seek broad perspectives and input, and I think that's important, and we are going to need help doing it, in having help from a firm that has worked with other municipalities of similar scale to us, right? Because this is a process that will involve scale if we're going to do things, as Commissioner O'Neill said, which is not just figure out the perspectives of the people who come and volunteer their perspectives, but the people whose perspectives we have to go and seek out, right? We're going to need help with that. I will say that we have had committees that are working on this process and have been laying the foundation for it, the police committee being one, but the police engagement committee especially being another. And I think that is also going to help us with the foundation for it. I also don't want to make my motion without thanking Assistant Township Manager Ford, who I think we have seen tonight has done a really terrific job on this. And thank you for having done a really thorough effort on what is clearly important for us. Okay, so with that, it's a shame that my motion is going to be the table, but I do think that we should actually, if we have not had a chance to fully read the proposal, we should give ourselves the 7 days to do that. Telling to make a motion to table this to 1 week from today.
A motion to table has been made. Is there a second? I'll second it. So the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Brandon. Third and final item for this night, for this evening's Finance Committee agenda is the Solid Waste Fund financial forecast, which we typically engage in at this time of year. This item is not on our agenda for a vote. If a vote makes sense, we can proceed. If it doesn't, we can continue this in the October cycle. And so with that, I'll call on Eric Trout.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about solid waste fund this evening. The first thing I just want to mention is,
before Lori got up there.
all right, thank you. So in terms of what we're talking about, the solid waste fund, with these financial forecasts, recently I've had a real strong streak of giving the board unexpected good financial news. This presentation is a little bit of the opposite story. If you recall, last year at the beginning of the presentation, I spoke about, again, unexpected good news that we had a combination of commodity market changes, which increased some of our revenue and decreased some of our expenses, which equated to around about a 4% fee increase financially. That's gone and almost kind of flipped on its head. That, in combination with some other things, make the solid waste fund financial forecast definitely more trying this year. As an overview of the fund, this is an enterprise fund. Those user fees, which make up about 87% of the fund's revenues, are to be set at full cost recovery. You can see some statistics in terms of the amount of trash, recycled paper, and commingled recyclables that are collected. In terms of when you look at the fee history for the solid waste fund, you kind of see this is, we've got about 13 years up here. So it's a decade plus. It's also interesting as you see that there's never been more than 3 years at the same fee level. Overall, given the fee structure changes that have occurred over time, if you look at the mini can, because that's the one thing that's consistent across the board, what the changes equate to from 2010 to 2023 is roughly about a 2.5% fee increase per year. When you look at the solid waste fund, it's important to look at what people are subscribed to. Again, we're one of the very few communities that provides a financial incentive for residents to reduce the amount of waste that they put out. Most just have a flat fee or it's something built in the millage and no limits. So what you see here is that over 90% of residents are basically at the mini can or standard level, which is 1 to 2 cans per week. And generally what you see is people are moving towards lower subscriptions. And this is something that we've seen over the last 10 plus years. You can see the changes from the previous year to this year. The other thing that's interesting is just rear yard pickup does continue to decline as new residents move in and maybe don't have that built up affinity for rear yard, which maybe some of our more longer term residents have. That's generally can be a good thing if it's something that is constraining any growth or decreasing overall tonnage in terms of trash, but it also is something that restricts revenue growth, obviously, if you have a decreasing subscription base. And this kind of highlights that graphically. You can see that people have moved towards the mini can, towards the standard level, and away from the higher levels. So when you look at the revenues, again, the vast majority is related to the overall solid waste fee. Your other revenue sources are very minimal. I've spoken with the Public Works Director. One small fee that we do anticipate changing next year is their special pickup fee, or bulk pickup fee. That has stood or stands currently at $40 for 3 items. Based on our cost analysis and also looking at some of our neighboring communities, which both charge more, $75 for 5 items or $22 an item, we intend to move that up to $60 for next year. That might be like $3,000 to $5,000, so it's not going to be something that really changes the scope of the forecast. You also see some numbers here, which I'll talk in a little bit more depth later, on the recycled paper markets and the changes, and it's really been a roller coaster in terms of how much money and how much revenue then we get for that recycled paper. We get much more revenue from that recycled paper because we are a dual stream community. The expenditures, one thing that you can see here is the stark increase when we did go back out for bid on our hauling and disposal. We had a very difficult contract renewal in terms of the bids came in, there was one bid, and it was a lot more. So that has increased our costs. The other thing, again, is commingled costs have kind of flipped from the script last year. And then the other costs are really, pretty fixed costs. That's your wages and benefits, your rental rates for the equipment fund. All of this stuff is just about 96% of the overall solid waste fund. So, when you look over the last couple of years, there's a couple of things I just want to highlight in terms of specific things which have really increased from when you look at 2020 to where we're estimating that they end in 2023. One is the equipment fund rental rates. So we've talked about the equipment fund before. I'm sure we'll talk about it more. This has nothing to do with the funded percentage in the solid waste fund because it's always been funded at 100%. What this has to do with is the assumed future cost of equipment keeps growing and growing and growing. as does some of the costs of certain maintenance, parts, and things of that nature. That increases those equipment fund rental rates on an annual basis. We talked a little bit on the previous slide about the trash disposal rising. And then I spoke last week at the budget workshop about property insurance. So all of our funds, the solid waste fund is probably the second largest fund that pays a portion of the overall property liability insurance. And that has grown considerably over the last couple of years due to unrest in the property insurance marketplace. Despite these cost increases, at least for the 2023 budget, we're very close to budget. That's generally a good thing, but if you look historically at the fund, generally we have savings versus the budget. So being close to the budget generally would be considered a good thing, but generally we come in under the budget, and that's because of some of these expenditure challenges and cost increases that we're seeing. This chart here shows you the annual refuse tonnage in the red bars, and the cost is in the blue line, which goes to the axis on the right if you're looking up at the screens. So you can see we kind of bottom out in terms of overall tonnage in 2016. It increased a little bit, obviously a spike during the COVID with all the stay-at-home orders, and then has receded a little bit. The one thing I would say, at least if you look between 2016 and 2022, there's 60 some odd additional accounts that have occurred during that period of time, so that is obviously going to attribute somewhat to the increase in overall tonnage. This chart I spent a little bit of time on. I used to kind of separate this out, but as I look at it, I think it's more informative for the board if I kind of deliberately go through it and kind of explain things. So the blue lines is the cost we have. So lower is better, higher is worse for commingled recyclables. The red is the same thing, cost for refuse disposal. And the green is revenue for paper, so you want that number to be high. So you see that there's a lot of just volatility over time. This period right here where I'm kind of highlighting is actually a pretty positive period. Paper revenue pretty high, commingled cost pretty low. This period right here is a pretty negative period. I believe this is when some point prior to the pandemic, China basically said, we don't want any more of your commingled and paper recyclables, et cetera, et cetera. So that had a real shock to the marketplace. Then this is where we were through last year when things were looking much more rosy. Right here, what you actually see is we were actually for a few months at different times last year actually getting paid for our commingled recyclable. And literally within a 2-month period of time, we went from getting paid for our commingled recycling to having to pay the highest per ton cost you see over basically this 10-year period. I'm not necessarily sure, I'm not a global commodities expert. I'm not sure if this is basically, the thought that was out there in terms of commodity prices increasing right after the pandemic was because people couldn't get necessarily what they might say is like virgin paper, things of that nature. Recycled paper became more valuable. Maybe just the supply chains unkinking themselves and such has had an impact. I'm not really sure, but it's something that has definitely had an impact on the solid waste fund. And it's really unknown as to where these things really go moving forward. So all of these things add up to where do we stand financially. And generally the picture is not very positive. What you see here is we ended 2022 in a decent place. We expected to be 16%, maybe a shade ahead, but the changes in commodities in the fourth quarter of 2022 kind of cut that back a little bit. We were anticipating to be right around 10% or a little bit above that in 2023, and you can see we're anticipating being around 7%. The problem really is that these expenditure pressures, we don't see them abating, we only see them continuing. The increase overall between the forecast for 23 and what's shown there as projected 2024 isn't all that much. It's mainly the increase in personnel, hauling rates, and equipment fund rates. But the fact that it's grown so much over the last couple of years really causes a challenge if you're trying to keep your significant revenue stream flat. So that means that we need to consider some options in terms of what we want to do with the fund. So there is definitely a pressing need to take policy action moving forward. Obviously, fee increases are something that the board could do. If the board, for whatever its reasons, did not want to do a fee increase, there is funding in the general fund. That is something that the board could consider if it deems a wise move. You see numbers on here. You could also do some sort of a combination of different actions. Just as a illustrative example, and I can provide and calculate here tonight easily right for you other fee impacts, but you basically see here increases of 5%, 10%, 15%. If you recall back a few slides, generally our fee increases have been in the 5 to, I think the maximum has been 10%, at least over the last decade or so. Looking just at those fee increases, what this shows you is the top is basically the same chart you saw before. At the bottom shows you the additional revenue that would be generated, at least as estimated. So we can easily calculate what would be, based upon the current subscriptions, what would be that additional revenue. And then we basically take a percentage of that, because we do expect that because you are raising fees that people will try to transition to lower levels of service or will eliminate rear yard and such. So you see those couple of different levels, the additional revenue that would be gained, where the ending fund balance would be, and what that fund balance percentage would be as well. And then just as kind of an illustrative example here, a combination of a $500,000 transfer from the general fund to the solid waste fund combined with a 10% fee increase would provide the following results, at least in terms of the projections. In terms of why you might want to consider it, it's really up to the board. A couple main reasons would be, potentially to soften the blow of a fee increase, to cushion or provide some support due to the shift in commodities, which obviously isn't something we can really see in a crystal ball. And also in some fashion, the board took action last year in terms of the rise in terms of future costs of equipment for the general fund in terms of making a transfer. While the solid waste fund is 100% funded through the equipment fund rates, that also could be a rationale that the board might want to entertain in terms of a way to solidify the fund moving forward. There are some other kind of further policy items that could be discussed. I'll just mention real briefly, maybe I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, we had some difficulties in the solid waste fund, and I thought I came up with this great idea. I said, why do we have these free cleanup weekends? We could save a lot of money. And I was immediately told by then Commissioner McElhaney what a terrible idea was that, and he put a dunce cap on me and put me in the corner, and I understood that the 11th commandment in Lower Merion is you shall not touch free cleanup weekends. So while that is something that would save the township probably per cleanup weekend somewhere in $35,000 to $40,000, I also realize that it's a very valuable public service to the residents. One other item that just where we are unique in terms of the township and the way it does its solid waste and such with a couple of our neighboring jurisdictions, both Radnor and Haverford have an actual fee when you request a additional recycling can when you are not a new resident. When you first move in, you get your recycling cans. We provide those for free. Obviously, the board probably has an interest in encouraging recycling as much as possible. That could generate a little bit of money. Maybe we're talking 12, 15,000, maybe 20,000. But again, when you look at these numbers, those are extremely marginal in the overall financial picture. But at least I wanted to try to provide some options that aren't fixed, because most of our options are fixed in terms of the rates that we pay for disposal and things of that nature. So to kind of close, I know this is a lot of information to digest, and the board might have questions and want to talk about different scenarios, and we can do all of that. We can also talk about this next week. We have another finance committee next week. There is a need to move quickly on this. The board, if it is going to do something on fees, must pass an ordinance by the end of October. You need to do that because we need to know what those fees are, so that way in November, we can send out a subscription change notice to all the residents and give them the 30 days or so to then provide that back to us right prior to Christmas, so that way we can process all of those responses, so that way then we can process everything and have it on the tax bill. Obviously, you don't have to make an absolute final decision tonight, but we do need a decision on fees passed via an ordinance by the end of October. I think that's about it. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I believe our Public Works Director is also available via Zoom, and can also, if you have some question about the amount of money may be generated by a different kind of fee level, or a combination of transfer and fee, can answer that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So what I'd like to do is start with questions only. Eric's given us a lot of information. We're seeing all of this and hearing all of this for the first time. And then after questions, we can go to comments and see where we land. We'll start with Commissioner McComb.
I had a comment, so I'll defer.
Let's start with questions. Commissioner Kramer, Commissioner Gilda Kramer.
When was the last time that there was an increase in the solid waste fee?
So that would be on slide 5, and that was essentially, it was when the fees were restructured going from 2020 to 2021. But again, if you look at the mini-can level, which is the only thing that kind of stayed the same, the fee went from $237 to $255. So again, the residents have had the same fee level for the last 3 years.
Okay. Other committee members with questions? President Sinai.
Thanks, Commissioner Zoloff. So Eric, I'm just looking at the slide with all the, what is the slide? It's 13. It's the one with the it would be Christmas, except it's the expensive fee lines. It's the red and green and blue ones. So I guess the first question I have is, like, you're reporting these, almost like twice a year. These things are moving all around. Like, does every municipality pay for their refuse on the spot market? Is it just a spot market price? Is there no kind of fixed multi-year contract where we lock in our refuse or our recycling for? Does that exist?
I don't know the exact answer to that in terms of in terms of what other municipalities do. What I can tell you is, for paper, what we have is a base floor. So like someone has to pay us X amount. Okay. And then they have to pay us if the index is above that, they have to pay us that increment. Okay. For the commingled, that does work based on an index. I'm not sure if the township manager has any other experience with that, or?
There are places that will try and bid a multi-year contract to lock in a price, but of course then the hauler is then padding that number considerably to reflect the gyrations potentially in the market. Yep. So they may be paying even more than we're paying. Yes. For the right to be able to lock in that price.
It's just a question of who wants to absorb the volatility, us or them, and so that was my question. And then the second is, it's just a little hard to tell from this graph. So when commingled moves against us and paper moves for us, is the amount of money we pay for commingled sort of comparable to what we get for paper? Do those tend to net out, or is one much bigger than the other when I look at this?
So the paper recycling tends to be a better financial benefit than the cost of the commingled. So, for instance, 2021, the paper recycling was $283,000, and in 2022, we had almost $295,000 from the paper recycling. In terms of the commingled expenses, I gave you 21 and 22, right? 21, when the commingled was down, it was down to just over 58,000, and then 22 is still pretty low, about 79,000. So again, the paper still produces, and the dual stream process we have still definitely works financially. But that gives you a little bit of an idea. Overall, the commingled, while it's a huge, jump, we're talking about roughly $100,000 difference from 22 to 23. So on a percentage basis, it's off the charts, but on a dollar basis, in terms of at $8.7-ish million, it's a pretty small component. What's really driving it is your personnel, your trash disposal, and your equipment fund rates.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, you immediately figured out what I was trying to get at. It's like, I see the fluctuations in the cost per ton, but like trying to translate that into costs for dollars against our fund.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, President Sinai. Other commissioners with questions? Okay. Seeing none, let's go to comments. Let's see where this goes. I'm going to start, and I would be remiss if I didn't take note of the good work of Vice President Gavrin with some assistance from me as we simplified the system 2 years ago, and we thought that would keep us moving in a simplified way, although we're hitting a little bump in the road this evening. And I think Eric's explained. I mean, labor costs are up. We did add 3 full-time staff a year ago. The disposal cost is up. The commodity market is haywire. I mean, as was pointed out last week, and as Eric pointed out today, we are paying more to dispose of commingled recycling than we are paying to dispose of garbage and trash. And that's hopefully a temporary short-term situation. We know about the equipment fund, and as Eric pointed out, but it's worth emphasizing, the solid waste fund contributes 100% to the equipment fund, not 50%, as is contributed to the general fund in from other departments. So I think that the general fund is should not be a source of funding for the equipment fund, or excuse me, the solid waste fund. The solid waste fund is a self-supporting enterprise fund, as Eric described it. It should function on its expenses should be supported by its receipts. It should be a full cost recovery fund. And so I think it has been a number of years, and it probably makes sense to increase the fees this year for 2024, particularly as we learned last week. There's not a reason, we didn't make decisions last week, but there is not a reason to increase real estate taxes in 2024, but there is a reason to increase the fees in the solid waste fund in 2024. And I want to also comment on the fund balance. It is not a policy to have a 10% fund balance. It is a goal, as Eric's language said, we strive for. We don't need to be there. It does not affect our bond rating. That's very different from the general fund balance, where we have a policy that we need to follow. And so having a smaller fund balance going into 2024, because we have unusually high costs at the moment, makes sense to me. So I'll lay that out and see what other members of the committee think. Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Commissioner Zell. Eric, thank you for the presentation. I know you weren't necessarily promoting the idea of charging more for an extra recycling bin, but my recollection, I'll defer to Vice President Gavrin, who was the mastermind of our pretty creative and effective waste program changes. What we did, I think we represented to residents that we were limiting the number of refuse cans, but told everybody if they were very, very diligent about recycling, they could probably get down to 2 cans. And I had those conversations myself with people, and I think others did as well, which is, so having kind of represented that, it kind of goes against the sense of that's what we told everybody, and also obviously we're encouraging recycling. So as I said, I know you're not promoting it, you're throwing out ideas, but I think that's one that has some roadblocks to it. So thank you.
Okay.
I don't think the board would actually go for any of those 2 ideas. I just feel an obligation to provide options.
Understood. Thank you.
Vice President Gavrin.
Well, while I appreciate the comments from both Commissioners Zelov and McComb, and having my name so closely associated with solid waste, I appreciate that. No, I agree. I don't think any of those options make sense, and I think this should be a self-contained fund, and if rates need to increase, every few years, rates need to increase, and we shouldn't be transferring money into this fund from another fund. Thank you.
Other committee members with their thinking, their comments? Commissioner McKeon.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelloff. I agree, with a lot of what we've heard already, and I just want to point out too that the solid waste fund, as Commissioner Gavrin made these changes here for 2020, the two-can family rate in 2019, and I think of the two-can, that's really standard family, that's what a lot of people know Marina. It was $405. So as a result of the changes in 2020, it actually went down to $380. And there's very few instances when I can think of these kind of fees that actually go down. And it had stayed at $380 per family for those two cans from 2020 to 2023. And we didn't do anything to try to raise those rates or take those funds or use them somewhere else. This was an enterprise fund, and now I think we just have to do the right thing because of what's going on with the commodities market. We don't have the right enough money coming in for paper, and we're paying a lot on commingled. So to offset that, it's going to have to call for an increase in the solid waste fund. But I think that's fair because we were able to benefit from this for years, and people tend to forget when they save money, when the township saves some money. So that's why I wanted to remind anyone who's listening tonight. But it has been a very good deal the last few years, and it's just going to have to go up next year, in my opinion, because it's an enterprise fund, and that's where the money comes from. So thank you, Commissioner Zelloff.
Other committee members with questions or comments? Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, for the presentation. My simple thoughts are, I agree that a transfer into this fund is not necessary because we can be well within the guidance below 10% to 10% at 4.8, and that to me seems like a really healthy number coming out of the position where we are now. I don't think we need to hold on to additional taxpayer monies much beyond 4.8. So my hope is that my colleagues here will support a 4.8 max with no external transfer. And all I can say is I'm really impressed with myself that I didn't refer to the SW fee as a stormwater fee. So there's that. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Neill, just to clarify, when you say 4.8, do you mean as the ending fund balance percentage?
As the ending fund balance percentage, yes, correct.
Not as the amount of the fee.
Not as the amount of fees, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Gildo-Kramer.
I agree with Commissioner Zelloff that we should not be transferring money into this and that this should be self-sustaining, but I don't agree that there are no reasons why we might want a tax increase for next year and the real estate tax increase. And I think that discussion is one that we should have at the appropriate time later.
The public can't hear that.
Sure.
So, Mr. Willis, they will have an opportunity for public comment after this discussion. Is it about hearing? Okay, I would ask all commissioners to make sure that they speak up. Okay, other commissioners with comments. President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoll. I'll join the chorus. I don't think, not only do I not think transfer from the general fund is warranted at this point, I think it's something that we should not be in the business of doing with this particular fund. I think the idea here is that our residents get to see in the price of their solid waste what the actual cost of solid waste is, and so we have some of that transparency in there. If people want to reduce their amount of solid waste, they can reduce their number of cans either by recycling more or composting, which really, as Vice President Gavrin has said many times, has a tremendous effect on the volume of solid waste that you generate. So I think it's important to do that. And then we need to cover the balance, and the question is how much. And this is why I asked Eric the questions about the volatility and the uncertainty, which is the whole point of a fund balance is that in years where we're doing poorly, we kind of run it down. In years when we do well, we build it back up. I agree we don't need to replenish it to its target level in a year where it's expensive, right? That's the whole point. If we have a second year, it turns out to be persistent, then we're going to actually have to raise again in that year. But for now, we kind of, 10% sounds fine, raise the fee and then hope next year that the paper market improves and we see where we are at that point and then we reevaluate. So I support that proposal.
Okay. Others with comments? Okay, now will be time for any members of the public with questions or comments.
My first comment, Commissioner Gavin, is what is the point of procedure? Am I limited to just comments or questions or both?
Both.
Both, okay. First of all.
Yes, I know that you have spoken this evening, Mr. Willis, but some commissioners have just arrived, so could you introduce yourself?
Sure, it's John Willis from North Ardmore.
Thank you.
So, first of all, Lower Merion Township's Public Works Department is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. The guys, the folks that pick up the trash refuge every week are just doing an amazing job. They were incredible during the COVID era, and whoever is responsible for that, whether it's the township manager or Paul, or kudos to them. So, compliments are allowed?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And it's a sincere compliment, and I do my best to try to see them when they come out every Wednesday to pick up my trash. But here's the criticism, the severe criticism. You guys are all talking about funds, funding, general fund, this fund, where are we going to put this money, where the commodity, how much did you talk about reduction of tonnage? Where's the discussion of the reduction of tonnage? What efforts have been made to reduce tonnage? And by the way, Mr. Traub's presentation was fantastic. My criticism, it's too fast. I would love to have him to give that presentation in slow speed at a general meeting where a lot of members of the township, a lot of members of the public are listening to it. Where is the efforts by the township in order to reduce tonnage? One example where you can possibly reduce tonnage is yard waste. We went to the Public Works Department a couple months ago, and I said, do you remove, can I put yard waste out? Oh, absolutely, absolutely, which I was thrilled with. And then I found out from my incredibly loyal, hardworking trash collectors that the yard waste just gets thrown into everything else. Gets thrown in with the garbage and all sorts of other nasty things. I don't think that's right. I think you should make some efforts to try to ameliorate that. And if I think you did, you would probably have some reduction in the tonnage. I don't know that, so I haven't studied that. But anyway, what else did I was going to say? I know I'm not supposed to bring this up because it's not the police committee, but you guys you decided to table the issue with respect to the contract on the Tilly firm's placement for the superintendent. And you had a discussion about it, and you had questions about it, but you never asked about whether the public had any questions or comments. And I don't know if that was because of you tabled it or not, but, well, if you're going to table it, that's fine. But I think if you had then a discussion, you had questions about it, then the public should be addressed. Just a point of order. But anyway, Public Works Department does a great job. Reduce tonnage. Another thing is, what's the problem with raising fees? I think we should raise fees. You should be discouraged to dispose of more stuff and throw it into your trash can. So those are my opinions.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Any other members of the public who wish to come forward with questions or comments on this item? Jody, there continue to be no members of the public online?
There is one member of the public online, and their hand is not raised.
Okay. So let me start by saying, and Jody, maybe you can assist. If I neglected to ask for public comment after the second item on the finance agenda about the police recruiting contract, that was in error, and there should have been a request. So, Mr. Willis, if you would like to comment on the police contract, police recruiting contract, police superintendent recruiting contract, you may do so.
I have no doubt that Mr. McNeely and the commissioners have hired a very, very good firm, and you've discussed it to do the recruitment. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. But I'm surprised that there was absolutely no discussion about the compensation, and just even mention of the compensation. And secondly, I would like to know, not a criticism, but I'd like to know if you are promoting someone within, if the ultimate superintendent who is selected comes within the rank and file of the Lower Merion Township Police Department, which is quite a possibility, and I certainly would encourage that. Will there be a different fee structure for that? Will be there a reduction, whatever? Those are my only comments.
Great, thank you. And if anybody else wants to come forward on that prior item, now would be the time to do so. So, on the prior item with the police recruiting contract, I'm going to ask our manager to write down the 2 questions. We'll do that at the end of the Finance Committee tonight, so we'll try and stick with the third item, which is the Solid Waste Fund financial forecast and consideration of increase in fees. So, Jody, is our Public Works Director online?
He is.
Excellent. Mr. McElhenney, there have been some questions asked that perhaps you can respond to. One is about leaf bags and yard waste and where do they go? And then if you could quickly run through what is covered by the solid waste fund fees. In other words, it's not just collection of refuse, it's collection of recycling, it's collection of leaf bags, it's the free cleanup days 3 times a year, and there may be other things. So the floor is yours.
So, if I may, the leaf bags do not go generally to the trash. We have a composting site down at Waverly where they go. If the collectors pick up a bag and it is contaminated, contaminated means rocks, dirt, grass, there's a list, then those bags cannot be composted and cannot. They will go with the general refuse. Staff has a responsibility to check the bags. What they find normally is spring months and summer months, very few leaves or those type of composting materials are in those bags. So, but fall, every bag just about makes it to the composting site as long as it's not contaminated. We then put them in rows. We go through our windrows. We compost. We bring compost back to the Kegel complex. We have an overabundance of it, so much so that we have to give it to different entities that use it for different things like capping landfills and such, because we generate so much. That said, if Mr. Willis was informed by his collection crew that they just throw it away, I would ask that his address be given to me, and we will clarify if there's any misunderstanding with that crew. We have had individuals that feel that the bags should just be thrown away, and we've taken corrective measures when we're made aware that staff is doing so. But yes, we do compost leaf bags. We pick up so many leaves that during the leaf season, from the mid-September through December, we have to give staff from the highway division and sometimes some of our other divisions to help the refuse department handle the volume that we receive. As to what does your fee cover? You touched on a lot of the items that it covers. It covers us picking up your weekly trash, us picking up your recycling, us picking up your paper products. It allows us to have the open houses in the spring and in the fall for free dump weekends. It allows us to have the capacity to work with the outside vendors for the anything with a plug event. It helps us with the hazardous waste for the county. It also allows us to receive white goods, washers, dryers, those type of things to be recycled. There are numerous things that it allows us to do and pays for with that fee. Essentially, it's about $4 a week, and you get all those services for the year.
Thank you very much, Paul. Can you comment on how the township works with residents to reduce tonnage. The question about, what reducing tonnage was asked. Tonnage is certainly down from the peak of during COVID, but it is up from the low point of 2016, of course, as is our population.
So as is our population, and with your tonnage, it's being conscious of what you are putting in your trash can. People will throw away things that can be recycled. People have to educate themselves on what can and cannot be recycled and make a conscious effort of taking those items out of the general waste stream and placing them into the recycling stream. And reusing items if they can, repurpose, reuse, those type of things. There's numerous things you can do to cut down on your waste stream items. But it starts, as we say here, it starts at home.
Great. Thank you. Since you're on with us, I'll ask if any committee members, and please don't feel any obligation, but if you have any questions for our Public Works Director, now would be a time to ask. Okay. It seems to me that everybody's had a chance to express their view. So I'm going to make a motion for the committee to consider, but I do want to, respond to one point. In my view, as I said in my comments, for me, this makes sense. It makes sense to increase our fees, particularly in light of the fact that I don't believe we need to raise real estate taxes in 2024. I understand that not all commissioners agree with that, but I still think it is a important point to make. And so I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners that we authorize the advertisement of an ordinance that would increase the solid waste subscription fees by 10% for 2024. Do I have a second? I do, from President Sinai. The motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Well, Madam Secretary, once in a while, we are able to advance an item that is not on for a vote, and we just did so this evening. Thank you all very much for a very productive discussion and bringing something to conclusion that we didn't necessarily have to conclude tonight. President Sinai, that concludes the business of the Finance Committee for this evening.
If you want to go back
Thank
to
you, Commissioner Dunn, but
police.
you have a couple questions remaining.
I did forget the police recruitment contract earlier, and I forgot it now, but thank you for the reminder. I'll ask our township manager to respond on the questions that Mr. Willis asked.
The police recruitment that the consultant will help us with, he hasn't been selected yet, will assist us in doing an open national search. It'll be open to all qualified existing police officers in the LMPD, and it'll be open to qualified candidates from across the country. There will be no reduction in fee if the ultimate selection ends up being a LMPD officer.
Ernie, the other question asked was about salary of the police superintendent to be hired.
We'll advertise a range, and the ultimate salary decision will not be made until an actual candidate is selected and negotiations occur.
Great. Okay. With that, President Sinai, I believe that concludes the business of the Finance Committee for this evening.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zilov. We have the Public Works Committee next, and I recognize its Chair, Commissioner McKinn.
Thank you, President Sinai. There is just one item on the agenda tonight, and that is a resolution for the official sewage facilities plan revision at 1543 Monk Road development. And with that, I will turn things over to our township engineer, Joe Mastronardo, for a brief presentation. And you got it over here, right?
Good evening, everyone. Is this on? The Linden Hill subdivision is a 67-acre property that was subdivided into 5 lots. Earlier in the year, the preliminary plan was approved by the board. One of the conditions of that approval was to extend public sewer to serve the 5-lot subdivision. Part of that process requires a revision to the Township's 537 plan as part of the developer's application to Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for sewer planning and capacity approvals. And the revision to the 537 plan, currently the lot is served by on-lot septic system. We're changing that to a public sewer system. It's a low-pressure sewer that will serve the 5 lots. The resolution is an administrative function of the board that is a component of the application to DEP, and it's consistent with the approval for preliminary plan.
Thank you. I don't know if the applicant or the applicant's attorney is here. Would you like to make any comments, Mr. Brose?
Thank you. I'm George Brosman, representing the applicant. I agree with what Mr. Mastronardo said. A couple of additional points. As was indicated, this is a condition of approval that the sewer line be done in this manner. There was also a condition that my client obtain an easement from an adjoining property owner, which kind of set the location. My client did that and paid a substantial sum of money to do that. The location of the sewer line is shown on the approved plans, and there are conditions of approval that address possibly making field adjustments to preserve trees and things like that. All of those conditions still apply. My client is under a time constraint. Lots 1, 4, and 5 have been sold. He has a requirement from this board to install that sewer line, and also a requirement with the new owners of those lots to install that sewer line, and he would like to do so as quickly as possible. So we ask that you move this along as soon as you can tonight and next week. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, any commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Grimes.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner McKeon. I am going to ask the board to table this motion tonight. This sewer plan application poses some novel issues. This is the first time that I can remember where we've been asked to approve a development that's also a Class 1 historic resource. And when I got a copy of the sewer plan on Saturday and read it, it became apparent that, well, the proposed sewer will run under the historic landscape and the historic view shed of this property. And I raised some questions on Monday and actually had spent an hour on a Zoom call with Director McElhenney and with Joe this morning, at which we went over a number of issues about possible impacts that this plan could have on the historic resource. I am certainly not in a position to say that I think there are problems with this plan, but there are questions with this plan that I think are incumbent upon us to resolve before we send this plan off to DEP and to Harrisburg, saying that this board approves of it. Without going into detail, there were also issues raised with compliance of the plan with the conditions of approval. Mr. Brosman's right, they are bound by the conditions of approval, but there are issues about how they relate to each other. And lastly, because, as I think most people are aware, this property, and we're going to discuss this property, I think, in a few minutes in the Building and Planning Committee, this property and its historic nature have been of great concern to residents of this township, in particular residents of Gladwin. And because the plan was not provided to the public until this certainly I didn't get a copy, and it wasn't publicly posted until this last weekend. No residents have had an opportunity to take a look at it, and I think we owe them that opportunity. So I'm asking for a postponement for a tabling till next month's Public Works meeting so we can work out all of these issues.
So you're making a motion
Yes,
for that?
yes.
Okay. So it's a motion
Yes,
to
a
table
motion
it to a
to
date
table,
certain,
yes.
and just so we're clear, I
Yes.
think the next Board of Commissioners meeting in October is October 18th. So unless we table it to next week, we could get it on the September 20th agenda. By tabling it to October, the Board of Commissioners, third Wednesday is October 18th, I believe. Okay, is there a second?
So-
Oh, sorry.
We would do a committee meeting, so it would be October 11th? Would be the committee.
Be the
meeting.
committee, right?
So I'll make a motion to table
Okay.
until then.
Is there a second on the motion?
We get a point of clarification?
Yeah.
That's what I wanted, point of clarification.
Go ahead, Commissioner Stevenson. Go ahead.
My point of clarification was, thank you, Mr. Colley. My point of clarification was about the timeline. Is there a timeline? I wanted to know if this timeline, Mr. Brosman, you had said that there was a constraint on timeline. Is this connected to township dates, expiration? I just wanted to get some clarification on it.
Yes, tabling it to next month, we think would cause a problem. This has been in the DEP process for some time. There was quite a delay getting a response from the Philadelphia Water Department. No fault of my client, no fault of the township. This is basically administrative paperwork that says that the sewer line is consistent with the township regulations. So my client has obligations to put this sewer line in with the people who have purchased these lots. So that would be of grave concern if it were delayed to October. This sewer line was discussed at the preliminary plan phase. It is shown on the record plan. So I don't believe it's anything new at all. There's conditions of approval about it. So we would ask that we stay on the schedule for September. We're already behind.
So, Mr. Brosman, what you'd mentioned before, you'd like to see this, you have to get it installed as quickly as possible, and what we're here tonight for is a resolution. If we were to table this just for 1 week, as we did with the police committee issue, and so there'd be a committee meeting of the Public Works next Wednesday, followed by a Board of Commissioners for Board of Commissioners meeting next Wednesday, so that would be approved or not approved on September 20th. Would that be all right with your timeline, or is that's not
I would have had to wait till the 20th anyway for the board
Right.
vote, so I couldn't say it would interfere with the timeline, presuming that it goes forward then.
But in your opinion, October certainly would?
October certainly would. We would certainly prefer to not even have it tabled. That would be greatly preferred.
Right, no, understood. Okay, Commissioner McComb?
At the point of clarification, is there any reason to believe that this sewage line is not in any way in conformance with the township's requirements? I mean, is there anything? And the follow-up would be for, what are we looking at?
Well, may I answer that? You're not.
Well,
I think
I'm
you're
asking
Joe, but
Mr.
I'd like to
Township
answer that,
Engineer.
too. Go ahead.
Sure. This is a planning approval, so this is allowing the property to be upgraded from on-lot septic to public sewer, and that public sewer will be extended to 5 lots. The specific components about the size of the sewer, the depth of the sewer, the location of the sewer, all comes in with the construction permits that would follow once they get DEP approval.
But there's nothing unusual about it?
Nothing unusual about it. This is, the township has installed similar systems throughout Lower Merion, and it's consistent with our code. The type of system is consistent with standard practices. So no, we see no reason to delay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Grimes, you have something to add?
So, to say, and I respect Joe, but we spent an hour today discussing the issues with this application, he and Director McEnany and myself. The fact is that there's a possibility, and there are unknowns with this plan. There are possibilities that there could be venting pipes. And the question is, are those going to be put in the historic view shed, or are they going to be put somewhere else? And in fact, I raised the issue that I don't really want to dwell on tonight, but was somewhat unsettled, is because this is impacting on a historic resource, I thought there's a possibility this application should have gone through, had the Historical Commission review. I'm not concluding that, but it raised a number of legal issues. So what I'm saying is that, and look, I respect there's a deadline. I will tell you, I am in regular contact with the people who purchased Lot 1. I spoke to their architect, and I communicated this morning or yesterday. He has not mentioned to me any urgency on this matter. I know that people want to get this done. I'd like to get it done. But, and I'm not saying that I'm opposed to it. I'm saying that I'd like to be satisfied that the township is covered, because this will come back to us at some point if there's going to be a possibility of intrusion on the historic view shed. I'd like for us to deal with that issue. And again, it's also partly an opportunity for residents to have an opportunity to take a look at this as well. The fact is that this was on our agenda Friday, what we got Friday, but the plan, I understand Mr. Brosman said we've had there was a sewer plan mentioned in the preliminary plan, but I think we can agree this plan that we're approving tonight was not there and wasn't publicly posted until Monday, I believe. So there really hasn't been an opportunity for anyone concerned to take a look at it. So I'm asking for, I would prefer a month to have all the questions asked. That's all.
Commissioner Whalen?
Thank you. Just very briefly, I certainly understand the points raised by Mr. Brosman, but I think Commissioner Grimes raises a lot of very good issues. I see kind of no downside to tabling this to next week, giving everyone an extra week to look at. If it really turns out over the next week of review that it needs to be further tabled, that's always an option. But at least if we table it 1 week, we allow for this additional review, we allow for the public review that Commissioner Grimes is hoping for, obviously on a faster timetable maybe than some would hope, but we also keep the ultimate vote in place for now. So I would offer Commissioner Grimes a friendly amendment to table it to next week.
Right, and it hasn't been seconded yet.
Oh, I thought somebody did second it.
Because there were questions about what basically the scope of everything. So if there's no more questions, just about this, all right, just 3 more. All right, Commissioner Zeloff.
I'm concerned because we've been told that the property's been sold. We have a township engineer recommendation in writing and tonight. Residents' review of a sewer plan is an unusual concept because commissioners don't typically review sewer plans. I've never looked at one. And, you know, that there may be question about compliance with conditions of approval, that is a staff responsibility. I find this to be beyond the scope of what we typically do. Living with a week makes sense to delay, but beyond that does not. Because the outcome is still September, what's today? That would be September 20th. Yes, an outcome on September 20th is the same as to whether this committee acts tonight or acts next Wednesday, but the board should act next Wednesday.
Thank you.
I don't support as it's currently proposed.
President Sinai?
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And let me start by saying that while I'm sympathetic to the time pressures faced by this applicant, I don't view it as a responsibility of this board to hurry up because PWD took a while, right? So if the process gets bumped back because of them. Having said that, I also don't view that this board should, we should be predictable in the process and not have delay sort of showing up along the way, and so we should be mindful of that. So a week is no harm. A month is a different thing. Commissioner Grimes raises a number of issues with Class 1, with the conditions of approval, all things that I generally would expect staff to have reviewed and have a view on. I don't know if staff is prepared to respond tonight, and if not, then a week from today to have response from staff, and so we as a board can get staff's opinion on it. I'm going to go to you next. Okay. And also to hear a few more specifics, because Commissioner Grimes, you raised issues about the conditions of approval, how they relate, but you didn't get into specifics. But I think certainly for my assessment of it, those specifics I would be interested in hearing. And then the other is just a response of whether the sewer, as showing up today, whether it is physically different than what went through land development already. And so maybe you're prepared to answer that part.
The sewer that was presented for the application to DEP is exactly the same as what was on and approved by the preliminary plan.
Okay. And so Commissioner Grimes, sorry, if you want to let Commissioner Grimes respond,
I'll just
I'm
mention
going
this
to your
to Rosh
committee
Hashanah
meeting, but those are my questions.
Thank
and
you.
comments.
Thank you, President Steiner, for the comments. Appreciate it. On sundown on September 15th, Friday, is when Rosh Hashanah begins. So it's a shorter week for a lot of folks to respond. And Commissioner Grimes, I'll turn the floor to you right now.
Well, no, I mean, I think I've already made the cut. Thank you for mentioning the holiday, because I, in fact, don't work on the holiday. And I do have concern about a week. Look, the fact is, and we're really getting into the weeds on this now, the fact is that I got this Friday night. The plan, I had no idea it was coming, because the applicant didn't have to share it with me, did not share it with me in advance. I took a look at it when I got a copy on Saturday. I immediately noticed there were issues with the historic resource. I contacted Greg Pritchard, and he and I had a short conversation about whether this had been run through building and planning. The historic, for historic things, the fact it had not. And what I am saying now, and I will say it again, is that through conversation with our engineer and with our Public Works Director, it was apparent that there was a possibility that there could be removal of trees, which I will grant is covered in the conditions of approval, but also with putting vents in this property. There was also, Mr. McElhenney suggested an issue about clarifying that there would be directional boring of the sewer as opposed to, I guess, coming down at various points that might disturb it. And Paul had suggested that we might ask for the applicant to give us clarification on that, or confirmation that they would do it for less disturbance of the historic resource. The bottom line, because I didn't know that we were going to go into this kind of detail. The bottom line is that what I'm trying to do is make sure that this development with the sewer happens in a way that does not impact the historic resource. I believe that the way to do it with this sewer plan is before it's submitted to the Commonwealth, for the Commonwealth to review and approve it, that we make sure it's okay for us. So I'm asking for people's indulgence. It is out of the ordinary, but we don't have this come up very often. And it's a little out of the ordinary. I do not believe that it will delay this project. We don't know how long Harrisburg is going to take to review it. And it's not like the applicant, as far as I know, has a crew standing by right now. I'm asking for a time just to make sure that this property will be protected. That's really all we're doing today.
So ready to make your motion?
I thought I already
No.
did it.
All right, so does anyone second the motion?
No.
Oh, all right, Commissioner Church will give you the last word, and then we'll see if it's seconded.
Just point of order.
Is there a friendly amendment?
We're going to be voting whether adjourning until next week will be a friendly amendment.
Well, no,
That's not the motion.
The motion that was made was for a month. I believe you seconded it, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's where we're at, I believe.
Well,
All right, so, and Commissioner Whalen, would you like to make a motion to change it to September 20th?
Well, I would offer a friendly
Right.
amendment to change it to next week instead of a month.
And Commissioner Grimes, do you take that as a friendly
I
amendment?
wish I could agree, but it's a holiday for me, and I don't work on the holiday. So.
Understood.
I would prefer, if we met in 2 weeks, I would say 2 weeks.
All right.
But I don't
Any
think we're
comments
gonna
on
do
Commissioner Whalen's amendment? All right, so we'll take this to a vote. Just those on Commissioner Whalen's amendment to the motion, so that it would move it to September 20th instead of October.
Somebody second?
Yes.
Commissioner Churchill did,
Okay.
yeah.
You seconded Commissioner Whalen's also.
No. Oh, I'm sorry, did anyone second Commissioner?
Right,
Sean
that's
Churchill?
my question. Okay,
Sean
so
Craig.
you're seconding that. Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're just voting again on Sean Whalen's motion. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so the motion, and Commissioner Bernheim too. Okay, so with that, the amendment. Okay, yeah, any no's? All right, so I think it's 10-3, the amendment passes, right?
Well, no, now we have an amended motion that we'll have to vote on.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so that we're now going to take a motion, or a vote on the motion as amended by Commissioner Whalen.
Sorry, just to be clear, that motion is to table this until a week from tonight.
Right, so there'd be a special committee session before the Board of Commissioners next week, so we talk about this again. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and those opposed? So, Madam Secretary, I believe it passes 11-2. Yeah. All right, so with that, the application's been tabled, and President Sinai, that actually concludes the business of the Public Works Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McKeon. Our last committee meeting for this evening is Building and Planning Committee, and its chair is Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. So we have 11 items on the agenda tonight. The first is the escrow releases. I understand that there may be a commissioner who would like to take one of these individually. Is that the case? So, yeah, there is. So there's 2 of them. I will do them separately. I'll first move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with 135-5 of the Township Code for 325 Montgomery Avenue, Marion Cricket Club, escrow release number 5 for $12,261. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Is there anyone who wants to make any comments on this one? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor, raise their hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. The next, I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135-5 of the Township Code for 1632 Old Gulph Road, Thistle Green Development, escrow release number 8 for $138,306. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Are there any commissioner questions or comments? Vice President Gavin.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. On this one, I know there's been a lot of back and forth through the years, I'll say, and I want to make sure, just ask our township engineer if it's okay. Is he comfortable that all the conditions have been met in order to release this escrow?
Yeah, absolutely correct. There has been a lot of back and forth over the last couple of years. Just to address the final punch list issues, we did work with the HOA as well to try to address as many of their concerns that would fall within the township's purview. And all punch lists, as of today, all of the punch list issues have been addressed, and this can move forward for a final release.
Great, thank you. That's the only question I had.
Okay, any other commissioner questions, comments? Is there any public comment? I'll call the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a resolution on page 9 authorizing appointments to City Avenue Special Services District Board of Directors. And I will make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution to reappoint Janet Giuliani, Rich Gottlieb, and Susan McKee to the Board of Directors of the City Avenue Special Services District for 5-year terms to expire January 31, 2029. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McCohen. Jillian, did you want to say anything?
I don't have anything to say, but I'm here if anyone has any questions.
Okay. Commissioner questions, comments? Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. I would highly recommend Janet Giuliani and Rich Gottlieb, who currently serve in leadership positions on the City Avenue Special Services District Board. They've been instrumental in some of the many of the good things that are going forward with that district. Susan McKee, I don't know, but I know that she has some involvement with the Muse Gallery, and given our recent developments, of which Jillian is familiar with, our Bala Avenue of the Arts Project, it'll be good to have a connection with sort of an artistic or art gallery connection, so I think she'll be a valuable contributor as well. So I would urge favorable consideration of their reappointment.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Number 3 on page 13. This is a waiver of the Township Code regulating open containers for the Ardmore Oktoberfest event. And I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a waiver of Township Code Section 111-4.2 as requested by the applicant, Mirror Image Events, to permit patrons to possess open containers with alcoholic beverages and serve alcoholic beverages in public rights-of-way within a regulated area and a portion of, just says avenue. Do we happen to know what avenue that is?
Yes, it's Cricket Avenue
Thank you.
between Cricket Terrace
Thank you.
and...
Cricket Avenue on October 7, 2023, between the hours of 2 p.m. and 6 p.m., subject to Mirror Image Events providing required insurance certificate documenting adequate coverage as required by the township. Is the second, Vice President Gavrin. Thank you. Commissioner questions, comments? Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to endorse this this Oktoberfest. I think it's just another indication of opportunity to showcase Ardmore and its businesses and its community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Is there any public comment on this matter? Okay, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Thank you. Now, Commissioner Bernheim, we can't see you, so if you don't mind calling it out, your vote. If you can hear me. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, passes unanimously. The next item is concerning the approval of the 10-year plan and budget for Ardmore Initiative. Jillian, do you want to have comments on this one?
I'm happy to answer any questions about this, but we also do have representatives from Ardmore Initiative here that are happy to speak as well.
All right, so to get the discussion going, I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution approving a 10-year plan for Ardmore Initiative, which includes the estimated costs and proposed method of assessment and charges of the Ardmore Initiative for and concerning business improvements and administrative services. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. Okay. Commissioner, well, let me say this. Since the head of the Ardmore Initiative is here, if you want to make any brief comments, you're welcome to do that, no obligation. Just come up and identify yourself, please.
Well, hello, I'm Nancy Scarlato. I was asked to make a very brief comment, 1 to 2 minutes. So I am not going to go through the whole 8-page plan that you've gotten in your packets or that was emailed to you. Just wanted to let you know that the process that we went through was to create a 10-year plan and budget, which was mailed to 200 plus property owners. The mailing also included notice of a public hearing, which was held on July 11th. Following the public hearing, property owners had 45 days to object to the plan and budget, and we are now here to ask you to approve the resolution to reauthorize Ardmore Initiative for 10 years. As an aside, this would be our 5th reauthorization. In the plan, there's a history of the organization, There are summaries of our accomplishments, and there are plans going forward. And it also specifies the ways in which Ardmore Initiative will support the implementation of the Ardmore Master Plan. And there are 10-year budget projections. So we are looking forward to completing our 30th year as an organization. And we are looking forward to another 10 years with your support. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. Okay, if you don't mind just staying close by in case anyone has questions. So we'll now see if there are any commissioner questions for Ms. Carlotta or for Jillian. I see none. Are there any commissioner comments? Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to, if it pleases the board, I will summarize all my comments for all of these pieces that are coming up, but they will be short. Number one, I would like to say that I would like to thank the leadership and the board for their time that they put in for the work that they do around the Ardmore Initiative. The goals of the Ardmore Initiative is to bolster the businesses. In particular, a lot of these businesses are small businesses, homegrown businesses that need the support. Secondly, I would like to thank the staff for working with the commissioners that represent this area to enhance and looking at this 10-year plan, looking at it on all levels, from the economic level, from the implementation level, looking at it from the leadership level, to make this a robust and a reasonable but useful tool to enhance the needs of our community. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioner questions or comments? And this is Commissioner Stevenson chose to do. We have items 4, which we're doing right now, 5 and 5 both deal with the Ardmore Initiative, so you could make anything now if you want. Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Just to follow on to Commissioner Stevenson's comments. The Ardmore Initiative has done great work for Ardmore and the business district in Ardmore. Such great work that we've talked about it and tried to advance it in the Bryn Mawr Business District. We've not been successful, but I think in the long run, it makes sense for the Bryn Mawr Business District, which relies mostly on volunteers, and the Ardmore Initiative allows for paid staff to advance the interests of the business district, and the Ardmore Business District has improved during the life of the Ardmore Initiative and its predecessor organization. If it were up to me, I would allocate more of the budget to marketing and promotion of Ardmore as a business district. That's certainly what I would do in Bryn Mawr, and there may be conditions in Ardmore that cause emphasis to be more diverse than just marketing and promotion. But I think that I expect the good work of the Ardmore Initiative will continue to benefit the Ardmore Business District. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, did my colleague say that he's willing to spend more money?
You must have missed the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you. So, anyone else? So, seeing none, let me just say very quickly, I mirror the positive comments that Commissioner Stevenson and Commissioner Zeloff made. I think it's particularly important to have the Ardmore Initiative doing its work in this ongoing challenging time for retail businesses in general, and when we need, this board has recognized that we need as much support as we can get with economic development, with commercial economic development, and I think the initiative plays a valuable role with that. I'm also was somewhat surprised at the very reasonable budget that you work with. I, in my other job that I do when I'm not doing this one, I represent several special services districts in Philadelphia, and I'm astonished at the reasonable amount of income you're able to work with every year. So, and although I'm not calling for an increase like someone else might have been suggesting, I think it's great that you're able to work with that kind of budget and keep it reasonable for the small business owners in Ardmore. So, If that's all the commissioner comments and questions, we'll open this for public comment. I see no public comment, no one online.
No one online.
Okay, so we will call the vote on the motion to approve the 10-year plan for the Ardmore Initiative. All those in favor, raise your hand, signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item, number 5, this is an authorization to advertise an ordinance for the amendment of the Ardmore Initiative Articles of Incorporation, and I am going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorizing the Township Secretary to advertise notice of intent to adopt an ordinance signifying the intention of the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion to authorize filing of Articles of Amendment to the Articles of Incorporation of the Ardmore Business District Authority, extending the term of existence of the authority until December 31, 2033, and directing the authority to file Articles of Amendment with the Secretary of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania incorporating these provisions. Is there a second? Thanks, Commissioner Churchill. Commissioner, questions, comments? I see none. Is there any public comment on this matter? I see none. I will call the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand, signifying aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. The next item, number 6, is a resolution authorizing appointments to the Ardmore Initiative Board of Directors. And I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution appointing Sarah Holmes, Carrie Chalinsky, and Adam Elkins to the Board of Directors of the Ardmore Initiative for 5-year terms to expire January 1, 2028. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner questions? Commissioner comments? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this matter? Seeing none. I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand, signifying aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none. The motion carries, and we thank those 3 people for their service. Moving on, we have the certificates of appropriateness. There are 2 of them. Unless any commissioner would like us to consider either separately, I will make one motion for both of them. I see no one asking to consider one separately. So I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following certificates of appropriateness as recommended by the Historical Architectural Review Board at their meeting held on September 5, 2023. 1 West Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District, 23-13. Approval to install halo-lit channel letters on the Lancaster Avenue facade and a bracket-mounted projecting sign on the Anderson Avenue facade with a subcommittee to review the final bracket mounting location citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 9. And B, 14 to 16 West Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore Commercial Historic District, 23-07. Approval to reconstruct the Lancaster Avenue facing second and third story facades of 2 storefronts, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 6 with a subcommittee to review revised drawing specifications and color of stucco, gutter downspout details, and final mortar selection. Is there a second? Thank you, President Sinai. Any commissioner questions? President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So Greg, just a quick question on I'm not sure what the address is. 14 to 16 West Lancaster Avenue. One of the things that has changed between the original drawings of these, or the original the buildings as they are now, in the renderings are just like the streetscape doors and windows. Along the street. I have no objection to them. They look fine. I think they're a significant improvement to the streetscape over what's there now. I think the glazing's better and the regularity is better. So my question is just simply, one of the things that has come up before has been, clear glazing versus whether it should be divided in parts, et cetera. You thought maybe you could just, speak briefly to, like, how, that got evaluated.
Sure. Actually, the first floor storefronts of these two buildings was previously reviewed and approved. So this application is actually for the upper story facades, which had to be removed as a result of some structural issues. So it's for the reconstruction of those elements.
Never mind that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other commissioner questions, comments? Seeing none, are there any public comment on either of these matters? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. So we now move on to the Historical Commission applications, which I believe start on page 49. There's two of them. We're going to do these separately because I suspect on at least one there could be some discussion. So the first one, I am going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the application as recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting held on July 24 and August 29, 2023 for 1533 Monk Road, Gladwin, Class 1, 2023-N-19 to construct a new home with associated features including stone wall at 1533 Monk Road, Lot 1 of the subdivision of the former Linden Hill Estate, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 2, 9, and 10. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Okay. I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to give commissioners an opportunity to ask, make questions, comments, or ask Greg. So we're now right back to the Linden Hill development. And let me say that I support the Historical Commission's findings, and the reason I wanted to comment is everybody knows this is a Class 1 resource and is a very large property that is very prominent in Gladwin. And I will commend the owners of this lot 1 and their architect, because I believe that they are planning the most sensitive to the historic resource and the landscape development for their home that they could have reasonably been expected to do. I have spoken to the owners, I've spoken to their architect, I have found them willing to listen to the community, and as well as have hired an architect who's very good at what he does. So I guess what I'm saying is that, I wish they were all like this, and I recommend, I hope my colleagues will support this. So, having said that, anyone else have any questions, comments? Seeing none. Any public comment on this matter? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. The next is for 10 Monument Road in Bala-Cynwyd. Greg, you look like you want to say something on this one before we talk, before we do anything else?
If you'd like, I do have slides that I can go through.
Why don't you do that briefly, and then we'll see if people want more.
Okay, I will be as brief as I can. It's a complicated project. It's been a very detailed review by the Historical Commission, and I want to make sure that I hit all of the relevant points. So this, of course, is the building, the former WCAU building, 10 Monument Road. The Historical Commission's recommendation was generally approval of the application, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 9. But there were still a few elements of the application that they felt could be further refined to be more appropriate to the historic resource. And so the application of, for example, a masonry stain on brick surfaces, which changes the overall color of the brickwork on the building, changes relating to the replacement of the curtain wall window, which is the large facade length window along Monument Road and turning the corners. The colors of the framing and the glass, and the configuration of the northeast corner. The recommendation for the project was a 60-day delay, which if some of those items that they disagreed with could be refined, could be reduced to 30 or 0 days. modifications, and I can go through those briefly. So first of all, some pictures of the current masonry conditions of the building. The building is in relatively good shape, but there are places where it needs to be repaired and patched, and the commission always recognizes those things. Similarly with the windows and the glazing, there is deterioration and rust and other things that are generally wrong with it. Metal cladding conditions, it's in rough aesthetic shape, although structurally it's still very sound. There are also awnings on the building which would be removed as part of this project. And the proposed elevations of the building show a couple of changes, most notably on the Monument Road facade, which is on the bottom of the screen. The glazed area would be expanded on the right side. There are a few renderings that show this better than the elevations. So first of all, here is the present-day view of that particular corner, and a rendering showing how it would be redone in this project. The other corner of the curtain wall, the corner of City and Monuments, and how it would be revised. Now this shows the mostly brick area of the City Avenue facade, which would be, again, stained with a color that would even out the color of the masonry, cover up blemishes, but also have a kind of a grayer appearance. The commission found that, or believes that the current color of the brick masonry is a character-defining feature that should, if possible, be preserved. And so the recommendations, first of all, the first has to do with the location of the vertical columns at that expansion of the glazed area. They're shown protruding out from the surface, and the commission felt that this changes the horizontal plane of that Monument Road facade in a way that really is not characteristic of the building. Also, they felt that the glazing, the color, first of all, the greenish color of the glass and the light-colored framing of the glass is a character-defining feature. That's shown with a kind of a bluer grayish glass and a darker framing paint color. And then the masonry stain, as I mentioned, would be another character-defining feature that would be altered. And I'd be happy to take any questions about any of these items or the project in general.
Okay, Commissioner questions or comments? I'm seeing.
I have.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner McComb.
In terms of the color of the glass, if you could go back to the slide, and it looks like it's currently a green-colored glass, and the applicant is proposing a change in the composition of the glass. Is that right?
Yes, the current glass, which I believe is original to the building's 1952 construction, the glass has a greenish tint to it.
You probably don't know this, but do you know why it was originally done in green glass? Was there some sort of something to do with reflectivity or energy conservation? And I guess I'm getting at is there a reason for the change in the color of the glass, and maybe the applicant can speak to it, other than aesthetics, in terms of energy savings or some functionality of it?
My understanding is that the same glass product is available today, or an equivalent to it, and something closer to the original color could be replicated.
Okay. The columns, my understanding is that the applicant may be considering connecting this building to some other building, and is there a basis for the change in the columns attributable to that?
I don't believe so, but the architect could better answer that.
Maybe we could hear from the architect on that issue. Sure, Mr. Brosman?
Well,
I'm sure you're chairing the committee, Commissioner Grimes, so it's your call.
why don't we,
representing the applicant.
yeah, go ahead, Mr. Brosman.
Thank you. George Brosman. I represent the owner of this property, which is a special purpose entity of the Susquehanna International Group, which has its international headquarters here in Lower Merion Township, across the street from this property. That address of their headquarters is 401 City Ave, as many of you may know. As was mentioned, in the future, you may see a plan coming from Susquehanna to seek permission to build a pedestrian bridge over Monument Road to make it easier for people, employees, and visitors to cross from one building to the next. But I wanted to give a little background, if I could, and then the architect could speak. Before Susquehanna purchased this with their entity, I know for a fact that others were talking about demolishing this building completely and redeveloping the property completely. Susquehanna, through the entity, purchased this property, and they plan to not demolish the building right from the beginning. They made a handshake agreement to...
Could I ask you to address the specifics of this proposal? I think we're all familiar with Susquehanna here and who they are. Thank you.
I am giving the specifics of how we got here. They made a handshake agreement with the Lower Merion Conservancy to review this plan with them. We had a meeting with Mark Taylor, the president, and Kathleen Applenap. We reviewed it. They were thankful and supportive. They have hired an architect who's here, Tim Wanacelia from Meyer Architects. They chose an architectural firm based in Lower Merion Township, which I think is important. They have presented these plans to the Historical Commission 3 times. They did provide a lot of additional information, and they have made some changes, although not every change. They also submitted, I don't think they're here, but there was a feeling, I think, from the Historical Commission, or not understanding why wasn't Susquehanna agreeable to make more changes. And it was pointed out, and we submitted, that before these plans were submitted to the township for this application, Meyer had prepared 2 pretty thorough sets of studies for this building renovation, which involved a pretty large addition in one set of studies and another set of studies, not an addition, but much more aggressive changes to the building. After consulting with Meyer, Susquehanna decided not to pursue those, although they prefer those plans and would prefer to do them today. Part of their business, it's important to attract and retain highly skilled talent. They're competing internationally for that, and they feel that the facilities that they have are a very important part of that. So this is important in that way. To Mr. McComb's question, that bridge that I mentioned that may come forward, they're trying to make a new entranceway with that lobby area that'll kind of relate to the building at 401 City Avenue. We do appreciate the Historical Commission's comments. We have tried to be responsive. We hope that we understand the delay is recommended. We're asking that no delay be imposed. I think the purpose of a delay is to allow applicants to think through their plans, in some cases to document buildings that are being demolished, in some cases to make changes. Here, I think that process has worked. We've been there 3 times. Additional info has been provided and changes have been made, although not all of the changes. So we're requesting that you would approve this without the delay. But Tim, if you could come up and go over any of the project specifics and questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's do this. Let's see if commissioners have specific questions or for the architect, rather than hear a general program, because he certainly, I'm willing to entertain any questions people have.
Sure.
Commissioner Zeller.
Commissioner Grimes, I'd like to hear from the architect about the 3 items that the Historic Commission has suggested should cause a delay.
Okay. That's fine.
Do you need me to sign in as far as my name goes. My name is Tim Wynnewood.
Would you mind speaking closer to the microphone?
Sure.
You can lift it
Take
out.
it out. So my name is Tim Wynnewood. I'm a project architect with Meyer Design, as Mr. Bozeman indicated. We've been working with SIG for probably well over 2 years on this project, and just helping them to kind of think through initially planning and then now hopefully to move forward into a renovation of the historic facility. So to the 3 items that we had come to, I think we were given a list of roughly about 29 items of recommendations from the Historical Commission that we had been asked to evaluate and look through. And we had worked in conjunction with the building owners to basically review those comments and then come back with our thoughts. As regards to the entrance along Monument Road, the 3 columns, as we reviewed those with the ownership team, they did feel that that was an integral part of their design and desire to create a two-story lobby entrance. So this is basically a complete clear glass enclosure that will have a monumental stair that takes you all 3 stories of the facility. Also allows them to look over across the street to their existing building, and then hopefully, as Mr. Bozeman has indicated, we'll have a connection pedestrian bridge coming across in the future that we'd like to use and tie all together. Portions of those vertical columns are to help transition between the existing limestone material that runs along the base, and then also helps us to create a separation there. And it was critical as part of the ownership's desire for that design to really create an entrance and a presence at that corner. As we take that and then wrap it around to the actual vestibule and entrance into the building, there's a larger fin that comes off, and all of those elements were seen as critical to kind of maintain that condition, and understanding that it does break up the elevation to some degree, but we felt like the way we treated all of the corner of City Avenue as we wrapped around and then all the way down, except to the last 2 bays, that we had basically maintained that kind of historical fabric to it and desired to now create this entrance as a designation point for the design. I believe the other item related to the brick is we understand the desire from the Historical Commission to maintain the original color. We have concerns on our end as far as being able to basically present a condition that is not only clean and new, but also one that can be maintained long-term. So in using the stain, we feel like that gives us the best opportunity to not only maintain the building, but also to keep the appearance and that monolithic feel for the building around it intact long-term. And then I'm blanking on the 3rd item, if you can. Oh, the color of the glazing. That, I think, more than anything, is a preference from a color perspective. We evaluated a number of different colors with the ownership team, and ultimately, although we are, I would say, not a very far departure from the green to blue tint itself, it is still very much a clear vision glass. And so it is not a reflective surface, or is not a strong blue or green on either ends. So it was, like I said, a tinting of it and a slight departure from what the original was. I will say that in our kind of exploration of the existing glass, all of the glass, as far as we can tell, along City Avenue was replaced early on with what we understand to be bulletproof glass. So it's not original to the project anymore. And all of that was at one point done for various reasons, I think due to NBC 10's use of that as a spot for projecting and presentations in their live broadcasts. So that was not original, but as you move around the building, there is still some original glass there. But ultimately, from the overall design and color aesthetic, the ownership desired to go with a more of a blue tinted glass.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure.
I'm happy to follow up with comments if that's
Well, but let's
appropriate.
see if there are questions while he's still, this is questions for the architect or for Mr. Brosman. Any other commissioners? All right, I see none. So we'll now move to comments. And Commissioner Zelov, I think you have some comments.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. I think that the comments and answers to the questions from the architect were extremely helpful. They make sense to me. I didn't know this was a 2-year project and 3 different historic commission meetings. It's a general preservation of this building from 1952. I applaud the proposal. I don't think delay makes sense or is appropriate. And I think we should move forward to recommend its approval as presented. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner McComb, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I was just, for a comment, I join with Commissioner Zello's comments. I mean, that was interesting to learn that the glass is not original. It was replaced with bulletproof glass on City Avenue, which is somewhat concerning, but certainly suggests it's not of historical importance. And I think the functionality, I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, we were talking, we were hearing that it was going to be taken down, and it's a very tough building to reconfigure. There are very limited uses. There's a fair amount of decay and rust and so forth, and I think this is, I applaud the Historical Commission and the work they do. It's very important, but I think 3 trips to the HC and movement on many, many issues, these are things that I think make sense in terms of functionality and future use and preservation of the building. So at this point, a delay is just sort of punitive. It doesn't accomplish much. It's done. There's been a period for them to look at it, think about it. They've done that, and this is where they are. So I don't think any delay is necessary. Thank you.
President Sinai.
Thanks, Commissioner Grimes. I echo what some of my colleagues have said. If this were a Class 1 resource, I think I would vote to deny this change. It would be about preserving the Class 1 resource. This board in the past has not made this Class 1. This is a Class 2 resource, so what we can do is limited. I want to thank the Historic Commission for doing a tremendous amount of work. I want to thank the applicant for repeatedly engaging with the Historic Commission, including voluntarily tabling a meeting, walking away, reconsidering, coming back. I think that was a process, and I just want to Class 2 resources, the toolkit is limited, right? And there's this idea of this up to 90-day delay. In my understanding, when I came on the board, was that 90-day delay was a cooling off period. It was sometimes an applicant comes in, doesn't realize what they have. They want to put in a permit to demolish it, and then the Historical Commission says, whoa, wait 90 days. Let's talk about it. Let's explain what the resource it is. Let's not have another LaRonda. Let's not get it torn down. And then if we have a meeting of the minds, great. As others have said, there was that conversation here. It lasted much more than 90 days. It was repeated meetings with the 2 meetings with the Historical Commission. In the second meeting, the applicant saying, well, let's actually table this and come back later when we have thought even harder about this, which I understand that they did. And so I think that process has happened, and I concur. I think additional delay, achieves any more discussion. I think the discussion has happened, and there's just a disagreement of view between what the applicant's wanting to do and what the Historic Commission would like to do, and we're at the point with what we have with the code is, which the applicant gets to do what they want. I will support this. Thank you.
Okay, Vice President Gavin.
Deny that recommendation, support moving ahead right away. Sorry.
Okay.
That's what I meant to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So in the past 2 years, we've now had 2 important buildings within Lower Merion between St. Charles Seminary and now this building as well, with 2 very important residents, I don't know the right word, of Lower Merion, between Mainline Health and now SIG. And I think, in both cases, obviously we haven't gotten everything and exactly what we wanted, but in both cases we've been able to preserve the building, preserve a lot of the historic elements of it. While I would love to see this building preserved in its original state, sadly that's not realistic, just like it wasn't with the seminary. And so I applaud SIG for finding a use for this. As said earlier, this building's not being torn down. It is being used. We do have a use for it, which is wonderful that it will stay. While I wish it was more, you know, there's compromise, and that's what this is all about. My other comment is, as we've heard on Class 2 historic resources, and as I may have said once or twice over the past 6 years, we really need to look at this and look at, you know, hearing again and again and again, yeah, there's not really much of a purpose to this delay. We have to really look at Class 2 resources and how our historic code is structured. So that's something that I am sure will be done in the coming year, and something that we certainly need to do. So that's where I am. Thank you very much.
Right. Anyone else? So let me just add to what's already been said briefly. So first of all, let me applaud, I think, what others have said about Susquehanna's proposal. Susquehanna has made a very good proposal to preserve an important building in the township's history, and I think that getting 80% of what you wanted is pretty good. Having said that, I will also note that this property was put on the Lower Merion Conservancy's watch list some years ago and was recommended for Class 1 status. And for whatever reason, that application did not move forward. So to the extent there are other properties that people are concerned with, and let me be clear, this is apart from Susquehanna here, which has no responsibility for this. I didn't even own the property then. You know, for those who are concerned about what happened here shouldn't happen elsewhere, we should look at what's in the pipeline and whether things ought to move in the process. And that's not just commissioners, but members of the public concerned with preservation should also push a little harder if they feel that they need to. But we are where we are, so I support this. Having said that, are there any commissioners who would like to put the motion on the table, or I will do it? I guess I'll do it. So, and because we are not, my motion is not going to follow the Historical Commission's recommendation strictly, I ask you bear with me for a moment. I will recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the application heard by the Historical Commission at their meetings held July 24 and August 29, 2023 for 10 Monument Road, Bala-Cynwyd, Class 2, 2023-R-18, to make modifications to the building, including replacing curtain wall windows, expanding window openings at the main entrance off Monument Road, and constructing a vestibule addition, citing Secretary of the Interior Standard 9. And I think, I'm looking at our township secretary, I think I end right there, do I not, the motion, since we're not adopting the rest of what the Historical Commission had suggested? Okay, so that is the motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Zelov has seconded. Is there any further commissioner question or comment on this? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this? Seeing none.
We have one online, Christian Bush, and I'll put him in now.
Okay.
Maybe he hit the wrong button and disconnected himself.
Well, why don't we, well, I guess we should hear him before we take a vote, if we can.
Okay, here he comes.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Mr. Bush, if you could turn on your camera.
Sure.
Great, there we go.
But family issue kept me away. So thank you for letting me join you remotely. Sometimes the commission's job is difficult, sometimes it's easy, and I guess this agenda and these two items are a perfect reflection of that sentiment. I reflected before speaking this evening on what our ordinance says. We've been reminded about a lot of things. about this application in particular and what's important. But to me, I return to the ordinance because that's the only thing that makes a difference in terms of what our commission does. And if you look at the legislative intent of our ordinance, it is to preserve architectural integrity above almost any other thing. We have 6 items, I believe, in the ordinance, and 2 of them mention architectural integrity. So what is architectural integrity? How do we balance that out? How do we, the commission, say what is important and what is not? What is character defining? What makes a building a building? Well, I can tell you it's a lot harder for a modern building. Buildings like WCAU aren't typically loved. We lost a bank building a number of years ago in Wynnewood that was a bookend to our train station and a wonderful contrast. Many of you, if you were here at that time, remembered me appearing in person and pounding on the podium and saying that we had to do better. We had to do better specifically for the preservation of our modern monuments. And there are few in our township, but we do have some wonderful ones. This is one of those. So that's our task on the board. Our task is to stand behind those, even those ones that aren't loved and aren't universally recognized as being important. But WCAU is. City Line Avenue, some of you know, has a very important history with modern architecture. WCAU is one of the most important buildings, both gone and remaining. And so I take this task as a very serious one. And I'm disappointed by some of the comments that have been made earlier by the commissioners, stating that perhaps this is a good compromise, and perhaps we've gotten 80% of what we wanted. We got 80% of what we asked for, I wouldn't be here speaking with you this evening, and that's for sure. Mr. Brosman's an excellent advocate for his client, and I appreciate and respect his words always. But at the same time, I think the focus has been put in a place it should not be. Our ordinance does not task us with reviewing who's important in this township, whether somebody has saved the building, and whether that means we should let everything else go. No, our task remains the same, whether somebody has decided to demolish a building or not demolish a building, whether they are a huge corporation who employs multiple people in our township, or whether it's a single homeowner. There is no difference. Not under our ordinance, there is. So I task the commissioners to think about those things. And as for our rather important modern monument on City Line Avenue, we had a long list of items that we discussed with the applicant, and I must say the applicant did consider those. Obviously, they ended up on a different side of things than we hoped. But at the same time, in our last review, we really distilled everything that we had discussed. And I'm not going to go over that. It's not important. We distilled it down to the 3 things that you're aware of and that we've already discussed. The color of the glass, which the Solex glass from PPG was well published at the time. It was an important character defining feature, and it really set the tone for this building. So did the brick as well. And so, yes, the building won't be demolished, but the brick will be painted over, it'll be obscured, and it'll be deadened. Its rich liveliness in terms of its individual color and all the joints that break it up and provide it with horizontality, that'll be gone. It'll look like a monolithic field. The rusted framing of the curtain wall, well, we certainly agree with changing that. That could be preserved, but we also understand the need for changing and the desire to do so. We tried to convince the applicant not to cut away portions of the facade to make the 2-story lobby so big, but their branding for this building, both in color and for that lobby, was important to them, and they continued to push for it. And in the final analysis, we said, well, okay, go for it, but leave the horizontality alone. Don't break this up with those huge oversized columns that are vertical. They're the only vertical element in the building besides the vertical fin that used to have the WCAU logo on the front. So I don't think we, in the end, asked for that much, and we tied that into our delay. So I would disagree with Commissioner McCombs that this was at all punitive. This was to put the power of changing that delay in the hands of the applicant, and we did not consider a 90-day delay because the applicant tabled their own application, and that cost them 30 days. So we would certainly never even consider that. So we felt that the 2 or 3 remaining items were not big stretches. They were not big reaches. They don't prevent the applicant for having a 2-story lobby. They don't prevent the applicant from having the building they want configured the way they want. What it does is it's mostly color issues and the issue of those verticals which fly in the face of the entire horizontality and design of the building. So we don't think we asked much in the end, frankly, and we certainly didn't come close to 80%. I think much closer to the other way, 20. So in closing, and I know I'm going on, but this is an impassioned thing for me and for our commission. And so I take the temperature in the room and this one goes, that's fine. But I ask again, as I did years ago when we're on the eve of losing the bank building, I ask that we do better. I ask that we stretch our own perception and accept the possibility that buildings that we don't recognize as easily as being important or as easily as being ones that are familiar to us, that those are just as important. Lower Merion has an obscene wealth of historic resources. It's an embarrassment of riches that we have, spanning from 1600s to the 21st century, certainly the 20th. And this is square in the middle of that. It's a mid-century modern building, and it should be preserved closer, not further from what it is. And we don't mind change. That's important. But this is too much. So thank you. Thank you for letting me say my piece.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bush. Is there anyone else? Oh, just a moment. Jody, is there anyone else that on there that wants to talk?
Just Commissioner Bernheim.
Oh, okay, why don't we go to Commissioner Bernheim and then... and then we'll...
I did mean it the way that it sounded.
Commissioner Bernheim, you can go ahead.
If there was somebody else from the public, that's okay if you wanted them to go first, Commissioner Grant.
We're finished with there was no other public comment.
All right. I just felt compelled to make a very quick response to Christian Bush. He doesn't need me to say this. He knows for the years that we've been able to work together through his work with the Historic Commission, how much I appreciate and respect him and the Historic Commission as a whole. But I concur with the comments which have been made by Commissioner Zeloff, President Sinai, and Commissioner Combe, and I guess a couple others. And the point that I want to stress is that the concurrence with those views has absolutely nothing to do with who the applicant is and how, quote, important, end quote, they may or may not be to the community. It is as to what is being done with the particular structure and the explanations that we receive from the architect as to what they're doing and why they're doing it. Who is doing it has no bearing whatsoever, at least in my vote, and I would suspect in others. And I just want to point that out so that there's no misperception of any nature whatsoever. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. You had something to say?
Yes, thank you. And I wasn't going to speak here, but I have to jump in, I think, one more time to echo Vice President Gavrin here, because I don't think we as a board are not getting it. I deeply sympathize with our Historic Commission. I deeply sympathize with Mr. Bush. But the issue here, and I will not vote to support a 90-day delay because I don't think it's pertinent here, but the issue here we face is ours, not the applicant's. The applicant has done what they need to, really what every applicant should do in continuing to come back and work with them. Do I wish we got more? Of course. But that's unfortunately not the way this game is played. And the issue is there is no point to historic designations class 2. I've only been on the board 4 years. I feel like all of us are turning red in the face saying the same thing over and over and over again. There's literally no point to it. We need to get rid of it. That's our issue as a board. We should not have this conversation again, right? Vice President Gavrin has been beating this drum the entire time that I've been on this board. He is absolutely right. We should redo the ordinance, get rid of class 2. If the property is historic, as I believe this one is, and I fully endorse everything that Mr. Bush said, then it should be historic, and that's a class 1 property. So, thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Commissioner Zeloff.
Commissioner Grimes, I appreciate your indulgence for speaking one more time. Mr. Bush is eloquent, and I generally agree with him probably 80% of the time. But tonight I don't. This building isn't going down. It's been preserved. Class 2 is about compromise. And I do think there is a role for Class 2. I that's a debate for another day. I see vertical elements. He said there aren't any. That surprises me. We should proceed, in my view, to accept this grand compromise.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none. We have the motion on the table. I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none. Okay, the motion passes. The next item is number 9 on our agendas. It is all the way on page 71 of the revised agenda. As soon as I get to it. This is a waiver.
I'm sorry, there's another HC item.
Yeah, 43.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, as soon as I get back to the page. Oh, so there is. Well, hold on. What page are these on? Oh, there it is, 43 Writers Mill. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, my mistake. There is one other item. This is 40, I'm just going to make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the application as recommended by Historical Commission at its meeting held July 24 and August 29, 2023 for 43 Writers Mill Road, Gladwin, Class 1, 2023-R-03 to amend a previous approval to modify a residence with revisions to French doors, skylights, dormers, window product, and garage doors. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. Are there any commissioner questions, comments? Would anyone like to hear the rundown on this one? I see none. Is there any public comment on this matter? I see none, so I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries. Now, before we move on to the Suburban Square, the 100 Coulter, let me just say that I neglected to note a public comment when we were discussing the Ardmore Initiative 10-year plan. Ethan Frank wrote about parking as it relates to Ardmore Initiative's 10-year plan, and let me assure Mr. Frank that these comments were entered into the record and distributed to commissioners before the meeting. So I thank him for his comments, and I apologize for not mentioning that earlier. Moving on to 100 Coulter Avenue, a waiver of land development. Jillian, do you want to give us a synopsis of this one?
Sure. As you mentioned, this is a waiver of land development. The applicant is proposing I'm just going to get to the slides very quickly. The applicant is proposing the construction of 2 additions. I don't know what's going on here with the presentation. I can stop sharing. The applicant is proposing the construction of 2 additions to the existing farmers market building. The 2 additions have a combined footprint of approximately 3,000 square feet. If you are not familiar with where the farmers market is located in Suburban Square, it is located adjacent to the Trader Joe's, and it is located on Coulter Avenue across from the new mixed-use building, which is currently under construction. The farmers market, we have some existing conditions photos of the farmers market. The 2 on the left here show the existing building from Coulter Avenue, the views, and as well as this image right here shows the existing building from the rear as you would be looking at as you enter Trader Joe's. The areas outlined in red show the proposed additions. We also have some elevations showing what the proposed additions will look like. These 2 are the Coulter Avenue. The top is Coulter Avenue. The bottom elevation is showing the proposed addition, as you would see from the intersection of Coulter and Sibley. Moving along to the interior parking lot, you can see a portion of the addition along Coulter Avenue here, as well as the rear addition. And also the applicant has provided some renderings to better understand the 3-dimensional aspect of the project. The applicant has provided us a landscape plan which staff has reviewed. The staff had a number or a handful of recommendations that we included as conditions of approval. One was with the new outdoor dining space that's being proposed in the rear was reducing the width of the landscaping along the foundation planting and providing a nice landscape verge to further designate the outdoor dining space from the existing drive aisle, create a more comfortable gathering area, as well as an opportunity for some additional street trees. Another recommendation we had was to further delineate the pedestrian connection between the Trader Joe's building and the Farmers Market building. There's currently specialty hardscaping there, but over time it has darkened, so we are going to be working with the applicant to identify a treatment so that it could be visually differentiated. The proposal requires 3 areas of relief as a waiver plan. One's to not provide tentative sketch, the other's to not provide preliminary land development plan, and the third is to not provide a final plan. And lastly, there is a request to provide a fee in lieu for planting material that cannot be reasonably accommodated on site. That was my very quick presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Commissioner Stevenson.
Thank you. Jillian, can you give us a rationale or summary about, I know there were members of the Planning Commission had concerns about the parking piece. Can you give us some insight on their concerns?
With the addition in the rear of the structure, there's currently an outdoor dining space there. That will be enclosed to allow for additional indoor dining and vendor space. There are 4 parking spaces that are located adjacent to that. They are being converted to outdoor dining. So it would be a loss of 4 spaces. This project and the site really is interesting because of all the commercial developments in the township. This has a surplus of parking. Since the construction of the garage structure in Suburban Square, which happened at least 4 years ago, they have been in the positive for parking. So I think my feeling was that the general concern was the loss of those convenience spaces.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Commissioner Kramer, go ahead.
Can I make a comment?
What's that? Yeah, sure.
I think this looks like these are positive changes. I think it'll add to the Suburban Square neighborhood, and I plan to support the waiver. I think these changes are minimal, and I think we'll get a lot of benefit.
I did fail to state that the applicant accepts the conditions of approval as drafted.
Okay, anyone else? All right. Anyone care to make a motion? I'll make the motion. Guess I'll make them. I get to make all the motions tonight. I will recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of waiver of land development plan for 100 Coulter Avenue, aka 120 Coulter Avenue, Suburban Square Farmers Market, Ardmore, Ward 5, LD number W-23-002. The plan prepared by Mahan Rikiel, dated March 30, 2023, last revised August 22nd, 2023, shows the construction of 2 infill additions to the Ardmore Farmers Market building to accommodate new vendor and dining areas. The proposed additions are shown to have an approximate cumulative footprint of 3,000 square feet. Is there a second? Oh, thank you, Commissioner Sean Kramer. Okay. Any further Commissioner questions, comments? Seeing none, any public comment on this matter? I will note that we did receive a public comment from Michael Pollack of Ardmore, who wrote in opposition to granting the waiver, and Mr. Pollack's comments have been distributed to commissioners and are available for public inspection. I will call the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, any abstentions? Commissioner Bernheim, I cannot see your vote.
He must have his camera on.
Oh, I'm told you have your hand up, so I hope you do. Okay, so the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is a second stage plan for 30 East Old Gulph Road in Wynnewood. And I will move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a second stage plan for 30 East Old Gulph Road in Wynnewood. The plan dated April 26, 2023, revised August 24, 2023, shows construction of a 5,650 square foot residential dwelling with a detached two-car garage, patio, and stormwater management system. The 180,865 square foot parcel is currently unapproved. Parcel created through the 1997 open space preservation subdivision of 32 East Old Gulph Road, which resulted in establishment of 4 lots in a preservation area. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Okay, Chris, you have something to say on this?
Just very briefly, this is a very straightforward application. This is a previously approved 4-lot subdivision from the late 1990s. For whatever reason, it never really got built. It was built around a couple of existing Class 1 resources. There are 2 new lots to be built. Those lots were never built, but now the developer is coming forward to put those lots in. This is the first one of those 2 lots, Lot 3. So I had a graphic. Well, just looking at this graphic that we have up on the screen, this is showing the boundary of it. It's divided into 4 lots. There are 2 lots that have existing houses, and this is a lot that is set several hundred feet back from Old Gulph Road. There's a new house that's being put in. The format of the new house is a little bit more compact than it was originally prepared. It has a much smaller driveway. It has less disturbance on natural features, and that's what we look at with the second stage plan. What is the impact upon natural features of the curb cuts and the impact? We have no issues with this going forward. The developer will then put in the improvements for the subdivision, which is essentially a cul-de-sac road. When we were out there doing our site visit, we did notice that this area was dedicated as an open space preservation project, that the preservation areas, because these have been vacant lots, have fallen into disrepair. They need to be upgraded. We have conditions of approval in your packet that the developer will bring these into compliance with township requirements and the maintenance and operation plan before the certificate of occupancy. Very simple, straightforward. Happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments for Chris? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this matter? Seeing none, no one online, so we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda, on page 94 of the revised agenda. This is a tentative sketch plan for 268 West Montgomery Avenue in Haverford. I think we're going to have a presentation on this one.
I have my technical assistant here helping me out. This is a fairly straightforward application. We've all been by this property. It's on Montgomery Avenue. It's 268 West Montgomery Avenue. It's very close to the Haverford train station. There's a beautiful home along Montgomery Avenue, catty corner to the Marion Cricket Club, dating back to the 1880s. What the applicant is seeking to do is preserve that home. They're going to keep that home. They're going to do a slight expansion in the back of it to create a couple more units and then build what we call a quad, 4 new units in the back area where that star is located on this graphic. There's an existing garage that will be demolished, and where that is demolished will become parking for the site. So the existing 3-story building will remain. There'll be a total of 7 residential dwelling units in that building, and then there'll be a new 3-story multifamily building that is 4 units. It'll have 3 parking spaces underneath. The rest of the parking for both units will be surface parking. This is just a picture of the existing conditions. Building that's indicated with 2 will be demolished. Building 1 will be slightly expanded. One interesting thing about this project, it's been kicking around through staff for several months, is where we look at where it says Cheswold Lane. If you go to Google Maps, you assume that the driveway going into the Haverford train station is an extension of Cheswold Lane. Doing property research, it's not. It's actually a driveway from the Haverford train station. That's why in our staff memo we included a lot of history going back to this. And that's important from a zoning standpoint, because if this was a public road, the applicant would have frontage, they would be able to build more density on the site. But because this is only a driveway, they're limited in frontage and they can only add an additional 4 units. These are just some pictures of the existing building. This will be preserved. I think the key picture is at the bottom left, where you can see just what a handsome building this is off of West Montgomery Avenue. This is the garage to be demolished. And I think this is a key picture showing, this is an adjacent multifamily building. We took this picture from the parking lot on their side looking into the site. So there's parking for that building. There will then be parking kind of mirroring this on the new property. We did receive some comments at the Planning Commission and through public comment from residents of the neighboring multi-use building. There's concerns about stormwater, lighting. Those are really preliminary plan issues, but they should be identified at tentative sketch. So our process is working. We've been able to look at this, and speaking to the township engineer, one of the key things that will come out of this redevelopment is there'll be significantly more stormwater management on the property that's being redeveloped. So where there's currently stormwater runoff, a lot of that water will be recharged on the site. We've also been able to identify there's probably needs to be curbing on the property going forward to stop some of the sheet flow so that water can be collected. And then there's concern about headlights. Easily can be addressed through having a fence between the 2 properties. There's also concern by the residents about lighting, any security lighting or parking lot lighting that's coming in. We'll look at that very closely with the lighting plan when this comes in for preliminary plan. And then this is really what the plan is going to look like. In what it says building 1 is the existing building. In the back there's something bright, addition shown in bright yellow. That's the addition to allow the additional units and the reconfiguration of the interior space. The building number 2, the square building, that will be the new multi-family building of 4 units. The area in blue is where the stormwater management will be, and you can see the layout of the parking lot. A couple of things as we were doing our review. And we know this from the Haverford Civic Association and other people in the area. There's concern about people walking in the area. This has a very wide curb cut where the driveway meets Montgomery Avenue. There's on-street parking here for the driveway. For the train station, one of the things that we're looking at, and we've asked the applicant to do, is to look at narrowing that necking that driveway down to reduce the length that somebody has to walk across that curb cut. They'll be looking into that. There's some issues because this is Amtrak property, but the applicant, to their credit, has a good relationship with Amtrak and SEPTA, and we're hoping that they'll be able to work that out. Another great upgrade that will occur, because this is with our new subdivision code. The new subdivision code is going to require a verge and a 5-foot wide sidewalk along Montgomery Avenue. I did not stage the picture with the bicycle going down Montgomery Avenue. That was spontaneous, but we see that people do use this, and a wider sidewalk here will help. This hedge will need to be relocated back a little bit. It's going to be pruned back, but now's the time to do it because the property is being redeveloped. But there will be a new modern sidewalk put in here. It's a little bit wider. The verge will be expanded. I'm going to say probably at least a foot. I think that's a 3-foot verge. It'll go into 4 feet, and we'll have a better streetscape along the frontage of this property. There is an odd condition here where this is zoned. This is zoned between MDR3, which is our most intense zoning district, and that's what this property is, and MDR2, which is right across the driveway. That technically triggers a buffer. A buffer of tall evergreens here would be inappropriate. We have conditions in here the applicant will work with us to meet the performance level and measures of that buffer. So there'll be a lot of greening along the edge, but it certainly isn't going to be a wall of evergreens. but it will meet the requirements of our buffer requirement. The applicant's been very cooperative, and it's my understanding they accept all the conditions of approval. There's no relief required, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thanks. Okay. Commissioner questions, comments? None? Okay. Commissioner Zalb, I'm sorry, didn't see you had your hand up.
Well, I was looking for Commissioner Stevenson to see if he wanted to comment. We together attended the Haverford Civic last evening, and there was an extensive presentation with a lot of good questions and answers by the developers. And the Haverford Civic, while they fell short of endorsing, they were clear and they have no objection. Mr. Stevenson, you may want to add to my very quick summary.
You said exactly what I was going to say.
Excellent.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Would you like to volunteer any other commissioners for comments?
I'll stick with what I just stick with that, Commissioner Stevenson.
All right. Anyone else? Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Come on.
Boy, you can.
I'll move that the committee, the Building and Planning Committee recommended the Board of Commissioners approval of a tentative sketch plan. The plan dated June 6th, 2023, last revised August 24th, 2023, shows the demolition of an existing two-story accessory building with an 895 square foot footprint and construction of a three-story quad building with a 3,345 square foot footprint to contain 4 residential units and 197 square foot addition onto the existing 3-story multifamily building. The plans also show a reconfiguration and expansion of the surface parking lot serving the existing and proposed use.
Thank you, and I will second that. Okay, any other commissioner questions, comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this matter? I see no one present. We do have a written comment that we received from Sarah Abbott of Haverford, who wrote with questions regarding runoff and drainage, parking, and lighting. And again, as with others, those comments have been distributed to the board and are part of the record. Anyone else? Nothing. I will call the vote on Commissioner Zelov's motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries. President Sinai, that concludes the business of building and planning tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. In turn, that concludes the business of the Board of Lower Merion Township, or Commissioner of Lower Merion Township for this evening. Good night, everyone.